Well, good morning. The Senate Armed Services Committee meets this morning to receive testimony on the Department of Defense's fiscal year 2018 budget request. We welcome Secretary Mattis, Chairman Dunford, Secretary Norquist, and thank you for your many years of distinguished service and your leadership of our men and women in uniform. Before we begin, we all want to acknowledge the service and sacrifice of Sergeant Eric Hauk, Sergeant William Bays, and Corporal Dylan Baldridge. These three soldiers from the Army's 101st Airborne Division were killed this weekend in Afghanistan. The thoughts and prayers of this committee are with their loved ones. The sacrifice of these heroes is a painful reminder that America is still a nation at war. That is true in Afghanistan, where after 15 years of war, we face a stalemate and urgently need a change in strategy and an increase in resources if we are to turn the situation around. We also remain engaged in a global campaign to defeat ISIS and related terrorist groups from Libya and Yemen to Iraq and Syria, where U.S. troops are helping to destroy ISIS and reclaim Mosul and Raqqa. Meanwhile, threats around the world continue to grow more complex and severe. North Korea is closing in on the development of a nuclear-capable intercontinental ballistic missile that can target our homeland, and Iran continues to destabilize the Middle East and seek to drive the United States out of the region. At the same time, we've entered a new era of great power competition. Russia and China, despite their many differences, are both modernizing their militaries, developing advanced capabilities to undermine our ability to project power globally, threaten their neighbors, and challenging the rules-based world order. Russia, in particular, continues to occupy Crimea, destabilize Ukraine, threaten our NATO allies, bolster the murderous Assad regime in Syria, and pursue a campaign of active measures to undermine the very integrity of Western democracies. With thousands of our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines deployed in harm's way around the globe, those of us who are charged with the awesome responsibility of providing for the common defense must ask ourselves if we are doing everything possible to support our brave men and women in uniform to meet the challenges of an increasingly dangerous world and succeed in their mission. I'm sad to say that we are not. In response to rising threats, we have asked our military to do more and give more, but have given less and less to them. Our witnesses' opening statements are a harsh indictment of this failure, but they are right. I implore my colleagues to listen carefully to their testimony and heed their admonition to us. Since 2011, spending caps mandated by the Budget Control Act have led to a 23% cut to the defense budget. These reductions, compounded by growing fiscal uncertainty and continuing resolutions, have left our military with shrinking forces, depleted readiness, and aging equipment. This has put the lives of our men and women in uniform at greater risk, as this committee has heard in testimony for years from our civilian defense leaders and senior military officers. The administration's fiscal year 2018 budget requests, if enacted, could help to arrest the decline in our military's readiness, but ultimately and unfortunately, it falls short of the President's commitment to rebuild our military. The proposed defense budget of $603 billion is both arbitrary and inadequate. Arbitrary because the top line is simply what was written into the Budget Control Act 6 years ago, prior to the sequester cuts, and inadequate because it represents just a 3% increase over President Obama's defense plan. It is hardly surprising, then, that this committee has received lists of unfunded requirements from the military services totaling over $31 billion, all of which Secretary Mattis testified last night in the House Armed Services Committee that he supports. Our military service leaders have testified to this committee that this budget would staunch the bleeding, but we owe our men and women in uniform more than that. It's been said that this budget request focuses on readiness and it is true that the requested funding increases would make the current force more ready for the next year. But ultimately, readiness is more than training hours and time on the ranges. Real readiness requires sufficient capacity to enable our troops simultaneously to conduct operations, prepare for deployment, rest and refit, and focus on the challenges of tomorrow. This budget delivers no growth in capacity, which means that the joint force will continue to consume readiness as quickly as it is produced. These increases in capacity are reflected in each service's unfunded requirements. True readiness is also modernization, because if we mortgage future capability pay for present commitments, we have achieved little, especially at a time when our adversaries are moving at an alarming rate to erode America's military technological advantage and call into question our ability to project power. Here, too, unfortunately, this budget request poses the old false choice between readiness and modernization. The fact is that $603 billion simply is not enough to pay for both priorities, which is why the service's unfunded requirements are heavy on the procurement of new and additional capabilities that are desperately needed. All of this presents this committee and this Congress with a significant choice. The administration's budget request is just that, a request. Ultimately, it is our independent responsibility to authorize and appropriate funding for our military at levels and in ways that we believe sufficient to provide for the common defense. I believe that this budget request is a start, but we can and must do better. This will not be possible, however, as long as the Budget Control Act remains the law of the land. This defense budget request and the additional funding that our military needs is literally illegal under the Budget Control Act. This law has done severe damage to our military. It has harmed the department's ability to plan and execute budgets effectively and efficiently. It has ground the Congress's budget and appropriations processes to a halt. And worst of all, there are 4 more years of BCA caps to go. We cannot go on like this. Our men and women in uniform deserve better. It is time for the Congress to reinvest in our military, restore readiness and capabilities, rebalance our joint force, and renew America's military advantage. To do so, we must revise or repeal the Budget Control Act, and we must give our troops what they need to succeed today and in the future. Will the politics of this be difficult? Yes. But the question all of us here must answer is, how much longer will we send our sons and daughters into harm's way, unprepared, before we get over our politics and do our jobs? Senator Reid.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing to consider funding levels of the Department of Defense to maintain our nation's military. I also want to welcome our distinguished witnesses this morning. Thank for the service to the nation. I want to join with the Chairman in paying tribute to the soldiers of the 101st who gave their lives and their families. They are examples of thousands and thousands of Americans who serve and their families here at home that serve with them. Today, we consider the fiscal year 2018 Trump administration budget that seeks $574 billion in base funding and $65 billion for overseas contingency operations. As we all know, the Budget Control Act, the BCA of 2011, and the sequester are still the law of the land, and this budget request for DOD exceeds the BCA's defense spending cap by $52 billion. Rather than negotiate with Congress or propose an outright repeal of the BCA and the sequester, President Trump proposed to offset an increase in defense spending with a $52 billion cut in non-defense spending. But unless the BCA is changed, the offset will seriously harm non-defense spending and fail to prevent across-the-board cuts reclaiming the $52 billion, leaving DOD in a worse position. We have already held many hearings this year where senior civilian and military leaders have repeatedly urged us to remove the BCA caps and end sequestration. Like Chairman McCain, I believe it is time to repeal the BCA. Setting arbitrary spending thresholds on defense and non-defense spending has not made our country safer, and it has not fixed our broader fiscal problems. Nor do these caps, which were set nearly 6 years ago, accurately reflect what our military needs in order to confront today's threats, or the kind of domestic investment we need to keep America competitive and strong. Let me be clear, I am not opposed to increased military spending. Democrats have and will continue to support robust defense spending. But it is the duty of this committee to carefully review the budget proposals presented by the President to ensure that the funds are allocated properly so that our fighting men and women have what they need to complete their mission and return home safely. Every member, regardless of party, takes this duty seriously. I also believe that our budget must reflect our nation's core values and take care of Americans who remain at home. Our military personnel have a vision of the America they are fighting for, and it is our duty to protect that. I therefore have grave concerns about the President's budget request because it robs from Peter to pay Paul. The President's proposal increases defense spending, but it also eliminates $17.3 billion from the State Department's efforts to prevent wars and foster peace, which is the very kind of spending that Secretary Mattis has said is so crucial to our military efforts. It also slashes funding for health investments like the NIH and CDC and training for healthcare professionals to fight against global public health epidemics such as Ebola before they reach the U.S. This budget request also eliminates programs that help vulnerable Americans here at home. Certainly, our military needs additional resources to climb out of the readiness hole it is in and at the same time deter conflict with near-peer competitors, but I do not believe we should do so at the expense of diplomacy and vulnerable Americans. I would also know that for over the last 15 years, we have found it important enough to send our brave men and women to war, but we have not had the courage to raise revenues to pay for these wars, as this nation has historically done. As we examine what funding requirements are necessary for the safety and security of our country, we need to look at our federal budget in a much broader context. The BCA's delineation between defense and non-defense spending has had the unfortunate effect of pitting each category of funding against the other. Instead, we would be better served if we considered the needs of our nation holistically. I also believe that it would be best if we examine the President's budget request in the context of an overall national security strategy. Such a strategy, however, has not clearly emerged as we enter the 6th month of this administration. We seem to careen from one foreign policy crisis to another, many of which are the administration's own making. This takes up valuable energy and attention at a time when there are several significant national security challenges on which we need to be focused. Secretary Mattis and General Dunford, you have been consummate professionals and steady hands in a tumultuous time. But we face many difficult decisions, both strategic and budgetary, that demand the kind of leadership and engagement that only a grounded and focused President can provide. I look forward to working with you and my colleagues as we address these important issues. I'm proud that this committee has always worked in a bipartisan fashion during this process. I look forward to working with the Chairman and all the committee members to come to a reasonable agreement again this year. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Secretary Mattis, welcome back.
Well, thank you, Chairman McCain, Ranking Member Reed, and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to testify in support of the President's budget request for fiscal year 2018. Mr. Chairman, I request the committee accept my written statement for the record. I am joined by Chairman Dunford and the Department's new Comptroller, Undersecretary of Defense David Norquist. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, for your swift consideration and the Senate's confirmation of Defense Department nominees. This budget request holds me accountable to the men and women of the Department of Defense. Every day, more than 2 million service members and nearly 1 million civilians do their duty, honoring previous generations of veterans and civil servants who have sacrificed for our country, and it's my privilege to serve alongside them. We in the Department of Defense are keenly aware of the sacrifices made by the American people to fund our military. Many times in the past, we have looked reality in the eye, met challenges with the help of congressional leadership, and built the most capable war-fighting force in the world. There is no room for complacency, and we have no God-given right to victory on the battlefield. Each generation of Americans, from the halls of Congress to the battlefields, earns victory through commitment and sacrifice. And yet, for 4 years, the Department of Defense has been subjected to or threatened by automatic across-the-board cuts as a result of sequester, a mechanism meant to be so injurious to the military it would never go into effect. but it did go into effect, and as forecast by then Secretary of Defense Panetta, the damage has been severe, hollowing out our force. In addition, during 9 of the past 10 years, Congress has enacted 30 separate continuing resolutions to fund the Department of Defense, thus inhibiting our readiness and our adaptation to new challenges. We need bipartisan support for this budget request. In the past, by failing to pass a budget on time or to eliminate the threat of sequestration, Congress sidelined itself from its active constitutional oversight role. Continuing resolutions coupled with sequestration blocked new programs, prevented service growth, stalled industry initiative, and placed troops at greater risk. Despite the tremendous efforts of this committee, Congress as a whole has met the present challenge with lassitude, not leadership. I retired from military service 3 months after sequestration took effect. 4 years later, I returned to the department, and I have been shocked by what I've seen about our readiness to fight. While nothing can compare to the heartache caused by the loss of our troops during these wars, no enemy in the field has done more to harm the combat readiness of our military than sequestration. We have only sustained our ability to meet America's commitments abroad for our security because our troops have stoically shouldered a much greater burden. But our troops' stoic commitment cannot reduce the growing risk. It took us years to get into this situation. It will require years of stable budgets and increased funding to get out of it. I urge members of this committee and Congress to achieve 3 goals. First, fully fund our request, which required an increase to the defense budget caps. Second, pass a fiscal year 2018 budget in a timely manner to avoid yet another harmful continuing resolution. And third, eliminate the threat of future sequestration cuts to provide a stable budgetary planning horizon. Stable budgets and increased funding are necessary because of 4 external factors acting on the department at the same time. The first force acting on us that we must recognize is 16 years of war. When Congress approved the all-volunteer force in 1973, our country never envisioned sending our military to war for more than a decade without pause or conscription. America's long war has placed a heavy burden on men and women in uniform and their families. A second concurrent force acting on the department is the worsening global security situation that the chairman spoke about. We must look reality in the eye. Russia and China are seeking veto power over the economic, diplomatic, and security decisions on their periphery. North Korea's reckless rhetoric and provocative actions continue despite United Nations censure and sanctions, while Iran remains the largest long-term challenge to Mideast stability. All the while, terrorist groups murder the innocent and threaten peace in many regions while targeting us. A third force is adversaries actively contesting America's capabilities. For decades, the United States enjoyed uncontested or dominant superiority in every operating domain or realm. We could generally deploy our forces when we wanted, assemble them where we wanted, and operate how we wanted. Today, every operating domain, outer space, air, sea, undersea, land, and cyberspace, is contested. A fourth concurrent force is rapid technological change. Among the other forces noted thus far, technological change is one that necessitates new investment, innovative approaches, and new program starts that have been denied us by law when we have been forced to operate under continuing resolutions. Each of these 4 forces, 16 years of war, the worsening security environment, contested operations in multiple domains, and the rapid pace of technological change, requires stable budgets and increased funding to provide for the protection of our citizens and for the survival of our freedoms. I reiterate that security and solvency are my watchwords as Secretary of Defense. The fundamental responsibility of our government is to defend the American people, providing for our security. And we cannot defend America and help others if our nation is not both strong and solvent. So we in the Department of Defense owe it to the American public to ensure we spend each dollar wisely. President Trump has nominated for Senate approval specific individuals who will bring proven skills to discipline our department's fiscal processes to ensure we do so. This first step to restoring readiness is underway thanks to Congress's willingness to support the administration's request for an additional $21 billion in resources for fiscal year 2017 to address vital warfighting readiness shortfalls. Your support put more aircraft in the air, ships to sea, and troops in the field. However, we all recognize that it will take a number of years of higher funding delivered on time to restore readiness. To strengthen the military, President Trump requested a $639 billion top line for the FY 2018 defense budget. This year's budget reflects 5 priorities. The first priority is continuing to improve warfighter readiness begun in 2017, filling in the holes from trade-offs made during 16 years of war, 9 years of continuing resolutions, and Budget Control Act caps. The second priority is increasing capacity and lethality while preparing for future investment, driven by the results from the National Defense Strategy we are working on now. Our fiscal year 2018 budget request ensures the nation's current nuclear deterrent will be sustained and supports continuation of its much-needed modernization process. The third priority is reforming how the department does business. I am devoted to gaining full value from every taxpayer dollar that's spent on defense, thereby earning the trust of Congress and the American people. We have begun implementation of a range of reform initiatives directed by the 2017 National Defense Authorization Act, and we are on track to enter into a full agency-wide financial statement audit as required by statute. I urge Congress to support the Department's request for authority to conduct a 2021 Base Realignment and Closure, or BRAC round. I recognize the careful deliberation that members must exercise in considering this, but BRAC is one of the most successful and significant efficiency programs we have. We forecast that a properly focused base closure effort will generate $2 billion or more annually, and over a 5-year period, that would be enough to buy 300 Apache attack helicopters, 120 F-18 Super Hornets, or 4 Virginia-class submarines. The fourth priority in the FY 2018 budget request is keeping faith with service members and families. Talented people are the department's most valuable asset, but we must continually balance these requirements of investment in our people against other investments critical to readiness, equipping, and modernizing the force to ensure the military is the most capable warfighting force in the world. Investment in military compensation, blended retirement, the military health system, and family programs are essential to fielding the talent we need to sustain our competitive advantage on the battlefield. Our fifth priority is support for overseas contingency operations. The fiscal year 2018 President's budget requests $64.6 billion, focusing on operations in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria, increasing efforts to sustain NATO's defenses to deter aggression and global counterterrorism operations. ISIS and other terrorist organizations represent a clear and present danger, and I am encouraged by the willingness of our allies and partners to share the burden of this campaign alongside us. Moving forward, the FY 2019 budget, informed by the National Defense Strategy, will have to make hard choices as we shape the 2019 to 2023 defense program. The Department will work with President Trump, Congress, and this committee to ensure future budget requests are both sustainable and provide the Commander-in-Chief with viable military options that support America's security. In summation, first, I need the BCA caps lifted and a budget, not a continuing resolution, passed on time, and elimination of future sequestration cuts so we can provide a stable and adequate way ahead on budgets. For those who are concerned we are not asking for sufficient dollars, please consider the following. For 2017, as a supplemental, we asked for $30 billion, and the Congress provided $21 billion for our administration to address readiness shortfalls. Second, this fiscal year, President Trump has requested $574 billion plus $29 billion in the Department of Energy budget, plus $65 billion for overseas contingency operations. This is a 5% growth over what the department had for 2017. This request is $52 billion above the Budget Control Act's defense caps. We have underway at this time a national security strategy review, and that will give us the analytic rigor to come back to you for the FY19 to FY23 budget requests, when we will build up our military to confront the situation that the Chairman and I have laid out in our written statements. I am keenly aware that each of you understands the responsibility we share to ensure our military is ready to fight today and in the future. I need your help to inform your fellow members of Congress about the reality facing our military and the need for Congress as a whole to pass a defense budget on time. Thank you, members of the committee, for your strong support over many years and for ensuring our troops have the resources and equipment they need to fight and win on the battlefield. I pledge to collaborate closely with you for the defense of our nation in our joint effort to keep our armed forces second to none. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and Chairman Dunford is prepared to discuss the military dimensions of the budget request.
General Dunford.
Chairman McCain, Ranking Member Reed, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to join Secretary Mattis and Undersecretary Norquist with you today. I'm honored to represent your men and women in uniform, and it's because of them I can begin by saying with confidence that your armed forces remain the most capable in the world. However, the competitive advantage that the United States military has long enjoyed is eroding. And a number of factors have contributed to that erosion. Chairman McCain, you mentioned several of these in your opening comments. Since 9/11, an extraordinarily high level of operational tempo has accelerated the wear and tear of our weapons and equipment. Meanwhile, budget instability and the Budget Control Act have forced the department to operate with far fewer resources than required for the strategy of record. As a consequence, we prioritize near-term readiness at the expense of replacing aged equipment and capability development. We also maintain the force that consumes readiness as fast as we build it. We lack sufficient capacity to meet our current operational requirements while rebuilding and maintaining full-spectrum readiness. The Secretary and the service chiefs have addressed that dynamic in their testimonies, and I fully concur with their assessments. But beyond current readiness, we're confronted with another significant challenge that I assess to be now near term. While we have been primarily focused on the threat of violent extremism, our adversaries and potential adversaries have developed advanced capabilities and operational approaches specifically designed to limit our ability to project power. They recognize that our ability to project power is the critical capability necessary to defend the homeland, advance our interests, and meet our alliance commitments. Secretary Mattis alluded to, Russia, China, and Iran have fielded a wide range of cyber, space, aviation, maritime, and land capabilities specifically designed to limit our ability to deploy, employ, and sustain our forces. Russia and China have also modernized their nuclear arsenal, while North Korea has been on a relentless path to field a nuclear-armed ICBM that can reach the United States. In just a few years, if we don't change the trajectory, we will lose our qualitative and our quantitative competitive advantage. The consequences will be profound. It'll affect our nuclear deterrence, our conventional deterrence, and our ability to respond if deterrence fails. Alternatively, we can maintain our competitive advantage with sustained, sufficient, and predictable funding. To that end, the FY18 budget is an essential step. However, this request alone will not fully restore readiness or arrest the erosion of our competitive advantage. Doing that is going to require sustained investment beyond FY18. Specific recommendations for FY19 and beyond will be informed by the forthcoming National Defense Strategy. However, we know now that continued growth in the base budget of at least 3% above inflation is the floor necessary to preserve just the competitive advantage we have today, and we can't assume that our adversaries will stand still. As we ask for your support, we recognize the responsibility to maintain the trust of the American taxpayer. We take this responsibility seriously, and we continue to eliminate redundancies and achieve efficiencies where possible. Thank you again for the opportunity to appear before you this morning, and more importantly, thank you for ensuring that American sons and daughters never find themselves in a fair fight. And with that, Chairman, I'm prepared to take questions.
Secretary Norquist.
Mr. Chairman, I have no separate opening remarks.
Thank you. Secretary Mattis, the committee received unfunded requirement lists from each of the military services, amounted more than $31 billion. Have you reviewed those unfunded requirements list?
I have, Chairman.
Do you agree these are military requirements that should be funded?
Chairman, I think we have our priorities right in the base budget, but I've reviewed the unfunded requirements. I believe it's $33 billion, and I think if we were to receive more money, those requests are appropriate.
I guess my question is it your request that we give you $31 billion more?
Chairman, I'm here to defend the budget as it stands because I can defend every priority there. If the Congress were to allocate additional funds to national defense, I believe the unfunded priority list gives good priorities.
So you're satisfied with what is basically a 3% increase in budgetary requirements?
Chairman, when it comes to defense, sir, we, at this point, I think that the President's budget is allocated appropriately to the priorities. The priorities listed by the service chiefs, as we go more deeply into the readiness challenge, are certainly well tuned to what we need. I'd be happy to see more money if the Congress was to allocate additional funds and along the lines of the unfunded priority list.
Well, I appreciate your willingness to cooperate, but a lot of times we depend on your recommendations in shaping our authorization and appropriation.
Yes, sir. I can't think of any priorities I'd put in place of the unfunded priorities list if we are given additional money, sir. That would be a decision by you. I have to represent the President's budget since he's having to deal with a wider portfolio than just defense.
Well, let me put it this way. Will this 3% increase give you the confidence that we need, that we are doing everything we can to make sure that our men and women serving in uniform are adequately equipped and trained and ready to fight?
Chairman, it took a good many years to get into the hole we're in. It will not be enough in itself to take us where we need to go. It's going to be a campaign, as I laid out, that started with our request for an additional $30 billion during this fiscal year, the growth that we have in the 2018 budget, and when I get done with the defense strategy and review that, we'll be coming back to you for more, and probably along the lines of close to 5% growth, 3 to 5% growth for 2019 to 23. But no, it will not take us the whole way. It's in the right direction.
It's now mid-June. Congress hasn't passed a fiscal year 2018 budget, something that should embarrass every member of the Senate and House. Neither the House nor the Senate has started drafting or considering appropriations bills because there's no resolution of the top line. This body knows what needs to be done, a bipartisan budget deal to set the budget levels, but has refused to begin such work. If we don't begin negotiating today, it's very likely the military will once again begin the fiscal year on a continuing resolution. What would be the impacts of starting this year on a continuing resolution at the Budget Control Act levels, or $52 billion less than your request?
Chairman, it can only worsen the readiness situation we face now, which has been laid out starkly, I believe, by the service chiefs, if we go in with a continuing resolution.
First conversation that you and I had was about a strategy for Afghanistan. We're now 6 months into this administration. We still haven't got a strategy for Afghanistan. it makes it hard for us to support you when we don't have a strategy. We know what the strategy was for the last 8 years. Don't lose. That hasn't worked. Just mentioned in my opening statement. We just lost 3 brave Americans. When can we expect the Congress of the United States to get a strategy for Afghanistan that is a departure from the last 8 years, which is don't lose?
I believe by mid-July, we'll be able to brief you in detail, sir. We're putting it together now, and there are actions being taken to make certain that we don't pay a price for the delay. But we recognize the need for urgency, and your criticism is fair, sir.
Well, I'm a great admirer of yours, Mr. Secretary, and so are those men and women who have had the honor of serving under you. But we just can't keep going like this. You can't expect us to fulfill the 3 requirements that you gave: funding increase, pass a budget, present a stable budget, if you don't give us a strategy. And I hope you understand that I'm not criticizing you, but there are problems within this administration. I was confident that within the first 30 to 60 days, we would have a strategy from which to start working. So all I can tell you is that unless we get a strategy from you, you're going to get a strategy from us. And I appreciate our wisdom and knowledge and information and all of the great things, with the exception of some to my left here. But the fact is, it's not our job. It's not our job. It's yours. And I have to tell you, the frustration that I feel is obviously palpable, because it's hard for us to act when you don't give us a strategy, which then leads to policy, which then leads to authorization, which is our job. So I hope you understand that we're going to start getting more vocal in our criticism of not having a strategy for Afghanistan. Do you agree that we're not winning in Afghanistan?
Sir, I understand the urgency. I understand it's my responsibility. We're not winning in Afghanistan right now, and we will correct this as soon as possible. I believe the 3 things we are asking for stand on their own merit, however, as we look more broadly at the protection of the country. But in no way does that relieve me of the need to deliver that strategy to you, sir.
I thank you, General, and I understand very well, as do members of this committee, that some of this is beyond your control. But at some point, we have to say, look, the Congress and the American people owe the Congress owes the American people a strategy which will then lead to success in Afghanistan. I am sure that the 3 names that I just mentioned in my opening statement, their parents and their wives and their husbands, and their families, their members of their family, are very aware that we have no strategy. So let's not ask these families to sacrifice any further without a strategy which we can then take and implement and help you. I'm fighting as hard as I can to increase defense spending. It's hard when we have no strategy to pursue. So I hope you understand the dilemma that you are presenting to us. Senator.
I do, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, as we discussed in your testimony and the Chairman in my testimony, even if you get the additional $52 billion with sequestration in place, you would essentially have to turn around and forfeit that in across-the-board cuts. Is that your understanding?
Yes, sir.
And those across-the-board cuts would be more disruptive than anything I could conceive, because there would be no prioritization. It would just be taking from the most sensitive programs, in fact, leaving money in programs that might not even need it. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir. It would be injurious, and again, it would sideline both this committee and myself in making wise decisions.
Did you make that point to the President in terms of the ultimate consultation about this budget in his role as Commander-in-Chief?
I assure you, sir, President Trump is keenly aware of this situation.
And what is his position on sequestration?
I'd prefer to speak to mine, sir, because I can speak most authoritatively there. Bottom line is the administration believes that the Congress has to repeal the Budget Control Act and the sequestration that follows.
But wouldn't it be not only appropriate but essential that that be incorporated in the President's budget? Because the ramifications of sequestration are clearly played out in every aspect of the budget. And remaining silent, as I believe he did in the budget, leaves a lot of people wondering what is his real position, or does he even understand what's going on?
Senator Reid, we're part of the executive branch, and Article 1 of the Constitution gives you that authority to deal with that very situation. I think we all know what needs to be done. I've heard it from Republicans and Democrats on this committee for a long time.
But the interesting thing is I haven't heard a clarion call from the President, and also a practical response and solution as to how we not only undo the BCA, but how do you then allocate resources between defense spending, domestic spending, other spending? And without that, again, it goes to the sort of in the same trajectory of no strategy. There's no budgetary strategy here either. It's just Congress do something. And I think the chairman's point is it's very late in the game. And the ability for us just institutionally to rewrite a budget, to reallocate resources between defense and non-defense, to increase defense spending without any guideline or framework from the administration is just not impossible, very difficult. Do you sense that?
Senator Reid, we've submitted a presidential budget for the Department of Defense. We believe that is guidance. We've submitted the unfunded priority list from the Pentagon in accordance with the will of Congress, and we believe that is guidance for what we need.
Just let me, final point, Mr. Secretary. I do, like all my colleagues, respect you immensely, but the budget that's submitted will not work. If nothing is done to change BCA and it's silent on BCA, the $52 billion we give you, we will take back, in fact, in a more harmful fashion, even if we didn't give it to you. If we just left the BCA levels, at least you could prioritize. So let me just change the gears for a moment. Have you received a direction, you and your colleagues in the national security agencies, from the President to begin intense planning and preparation for what appears to be an inevitable renewal of cyber attacks by Russia against the United States, particularly in the context of elections? Have you received any guidance?
We are in constant contact with the national security staff on this, and we are engaged not just in discussing the guidance, but in actual defensive measures, sir.
And has that guidance, as the President has clearly laid out in some type of authoritative way, the mission to protect the country in this respect, or is it something just collateral to your discussions?
Senator, I'm under no confusion whatsoever of my responsibilities and the organizations I have, National Security Agency and Cyber Command, about what we are supposed to be doing right now, and we're taking active steps on that I can brief you on in closed hearing.
So and General Dunford, I think you testified previously that Russia represents the most significant threat to the United States, not only in their new aerial denial systems that you, I think, alluded to, but also in their cyber operations. Is that still your position?
It is, Senator, and I included their nuclear capability as well as their behavior.
And again, finally, my last few seconds, do you believe that's the position of the President of the United States, that Russia, particularly in all these new dimensions, is the most significant threat to the United States? Mr. Secretary.
Sir, I'd prefer to let him speak for himself on that. I can assure you that from law enforcement to the intelligence agencies, and all that information is available and briefed to the President. We're recognizing the strategic threat that Russia has provided by its misbehavior.
But you recognize it. The question is, does he recognize it?
Sir, I've had full support, for example, for the European Reassurance Initiative, where we're sending more troops to Europe. That is not being, they are not being sent there for any reason other than to temper Russia's designs. I've had full support on the things that we have had to do in order to address Russia's choices.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for your service. Let me just say this about sequestration. When I think about the failure of this Congress and this government to deal with this, I look in the mirror and I take my share of the responsibility. One thing that hasn't been said is that the reason we got to sequestration to start with is that there's 2/3 of American spending that's on autopilot. It's very popular programs, the entitlement programs, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and of course interest on the debt. And sequestration was meant to focus us on that 2/3 of the budget that we don't deal with every year. We have been unwilling politically to do that on both sides of the aisle, and until we do that, we're not going to really be able to get back to the problem that got us to sequestration to start with. But let me talk about something, Secretary Mattis, that might save us a good deal of money, and that is multi-year procurement authority, which is assumed in your budget proposals for destroyers, fast attack submarines, and V-22 aircraft. It's my understanding that the Cost Assessment and Program Evaluation Office, or CAPE, that the Navy and OMB all agree that savings would be significant if we go with multi-year procurement authority, but we lack at this point a preliminary determination to begin to implement this. A final determination can come later, but we need the preliminary determination. So are you aware of this situation, Secretary Mattis? Do you agree that the assumption in your budget is correct and that this will save money, and can you help us on this?
Senator, I have no doubt it would save money to have multi-year procurement, especially of things that take a lot of steel, a lot of equipment to build. The economies of scale allow for enormous savings. We would have to have a repeal of the BCA Act in order to give the confidence to industry they can buy that stuff and it won't sit in the shipyard when funding dries up the next year. So again, we come right back around to the very thing the chairman and the ranking member have just been discussing about what BCA does to us. It removes the chance for even wise investment of the money you give us, sir.
Okay, but at this point, the immediate situation is that I need you to commit to this committee that you will intervene to ensure that we get the preliminary determination necessary to move us forward at that point. We don't need to repeal BCA to get that done. Will you help us on that?
We will help you. Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you very much. Now, let me ask you in the remaining time, I appreciate what has been said about winning in Afghanistan. Now, I notice over the last few days, a group of my colleagues have advocated it's been too long. We need to look at the timetable. A decade and a half is too much. We just need to pull out and let Afghanistan take care of itself. What is your and let me just say, I think that would be a massive mistake, which would affect security of Americans. I hope you agree with that. So if you could comment on that, but also define for us what winning in Afghanistan means, and if we if we're successful there and have a follow-on force that's not involved in combat, much as we have had for 70 years in Europe and a long, long time in South Korea, that would be certainly something that I could live with. But if you'd comment on that in the time remaining.
You're correct that to walk away from this, we've already seen what can come out of these kind of spaces, these ungoverned spaces. The problems that originate there do not stay there. They come out, they threaten all of us, they threaten the world order, they threaten our economy, they threaten our very country. As far as what does winning look like, the Afghan government and with international help will be able to handle the violence, drive it down to a level that local security forces can handle it. And with our allies, it would probably require a residual force doing training and maintaining the high-end capability so that the threats, as they should they mature, we can take them down and keep this at a level of threat that the local government and the local security forces can handle. It's going to be an era of frequent skirmishing, and it's going to require a change in our approach from the last several years if we're to get it to that position.
Do the people of Afghanistan want us there?
There's no doubt the majority do, sir. The reason the Taliban and Haqqani use bombs is because they cannot win at the ballot box, and they know that. And the people do want us there, and that's based on Loya Jirga outcome. That's the rather large assembly of local and provincial and national level leaders. Plus, it's based on polls not run by the United States, but by other organizations. And I have no doubt the majority want us there. Not all of them do, but the ones who don't are not the ones who are looking forward to Afghanistan's future as we think that it ought to look, we and the Afghan people.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to continue the line of questioning that was started by the ranking member. I'm deeply concerned about the success of Russian information warfare efforts in influencing the course of the 2016 elections here in the United States, as well as its efforts to destabilize democracies across the globe. How is the Department working with other federal agencies to counter Russian information warfare in the United States and the hacking of our electoral systems? And how are you working with our partners and allies to fight these efforts? Secretary Mattis.
Yeah. First of all, ma'am, there is constant information flow. Defining the problem is critical because they try to do it in a deniable manner. So we work inside our interagency effort, law enforcement, everything from FBI and any other police organization that gets information on this, but it's mostly been FBI. Our intelligence agencies work together too. We have good sharing of information. And we also work with our allies, sharing information back and forth. And you've seen some of that. Some of it can be released. You'll see it in the newspaper about what's going on in other nations' elections right now, for example, in Europe.
And this morning, Bloomberg reported that Russia managed to hack 39 states' electoral systems and attempted to alter data, though it was not successful. Last week, a leaked NSA document suggested that GRU, Russia's military intelligence agency, attacked a company that provides software to manage voter rolls in 8 states, including New York. The attackers then used that information they stole to launch targeted attacks against 122 local election officials just 12 days before the election. This information highlights the urgent need to protect our elections infrastructure from cyber attack going forward to protect our democratic process. During the last election, several National Guard units assessed the state's election systems for these type of intrusions. Do you think there's a role for the National Guard with its unique authorities in assisting and securing election systems?
There may be, ma'am. I think our organization right now is still adapting to this new domain. One of the reasons we don't want continuing resolutions, because we have to do new things. I also assume in something like this that what you've just outlined is not the whole problem. It's worse.
And do you think we should consider a 9/11 style commission to just do a deep dive on where are our cyber vulnerabilities? What are the 10 things we need to do to prevent cyber attack in the future? In the same way, the 9/11 Commission made recommendations that frankly have subverted terror attacks, certainly in New York State over the last decade, because those recommendations really did have an impact on how to protect against future terrorism.
Senator, I'd have to look at what is the problem we're trying to solve. I think reorganization of Cyber Command and NSA along the lines that have been proposed by the Congress, I think that also is part of the defining the problem and defining the defensive measures that we need to take.
But would you
But I would
recommend-
not be against something like that. I'd have to look at what the specific problem is it would be assigned to do.
To just make
but I'm not against
recommendations
that.
to prevent another cyber hack of our elections, just the same way the 9/11 Commission did it. Basically impaneling nonpartisan experts in cyber to just come up with the 10 things we need to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll just tell you, we have efforts underway to do these very
that.
things right now, but at the same time, I'm not against what you're proposing.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about sort of the world order in my last minute and a half. President Trump's decision to withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement was just one of the several signals to the world that the administration is repositioning the United States not as a global leader, but as a country focused exclusively on its interests. Upon his return, National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster and Gary Cohn wrote in the Wall Street Journal, quote, "The President embarked on the first foreign trip with a clear-eyed outlook that the world is not a, quote, global community, but an arena where nations, non-governmental actors, and businesses engage and compete for advantage." Our defense strategy has been predicated on working with allies to maintain the stability of different regions of the world, and yet this op-ed suggests that we would only work with allies and partners when it suits us. Is the Department redrawing its defense strategy around this new paradigm?
We do work by, with, and through allies. We have alliances. We have bilateral agreements. I think that we will continue to be working alongside others. The greatest generation came home from World War II and said, like it or not, we're part of the world. And that is a philosophy that guides our foreign policy as well as our military policy.
Admiral Mike McMullen, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and former National Security Advisor Jim Jones just wrote an opinion piece on the same topic. And you said something similar several years ago, that the less we invest in diplomacy, the more we invest in bullets. Do you still agree with that analysis?
Yes, ma'am. It's got to be a whole-of-government approach to the world. Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, gentlemen. I'd like to thank you both for your service and for being here today. First, I would like to note my appreciation for this budget's strong support for nuclear modernization and the comments that both of you made on this issue in your prepared comments, and I know, Mr. Secretary, you alluded to that in your opening statement as well. I was pleased to see the Department's request reflect the necessary prioritization for that nuclear modernization, so thank you for that. General, in your opening statement, you said that you assess that within 5 years we will lose our ability to project power. Can you put that in context? What is being unable to project power due to our ability to protect our homeland and deter conflict, meet our obligations to our allies, Article 5 under NATO, for example?
I can, Senator. You know, from my perspective, really since the 1990s, China, Russia, other countries have studied U.S. capabilities, from precision munitions to our ability to project power. We identify that as, we call it our center of gravity, but our source of strength, the ability to project power when and where necessary to advance our interests, to meet our alliance commitments. We think that plays an important role in deterrence. It plays an important role in assuring our allies that we can meet our alliance commitments. In the specific areas where they're invested in, anti-ship cruise missiles, anti-ship ballistic missiles, electronic warfare capabilities, cyber capabilities, all focused to prevent us from projecting power when and where necessary to accomplish our objectives. So they want to keep us from getting into the area, and this is both the case of Russia with regard to our NATO alliances and China with regard to meeting our commitments in the Pacific. They want to keep us from being able to deploy forces into the area and to operate freely within the area. And so when I talk about competitive advantage, in my judgment, the problem that we're trying to solve is to continue to be able to do what we have historically been able to do, and that is simply to project power when and where necessary. Again, I mentioned the role it plays in assuring our allies and meeting our commitments. I also believe that source of strength plays a very, very important role in deterring potential adversaries from initiating provocation or conflict.
And you mentioned that 5-year period. Do you believe that it's in doubt now?
It is eroding now. We have historically had the ability to do that, not uncontested, but in a decisive way. I think our competitive advantage has eroded right now. We would be challenged in projecting power today. We've done some very careful analysis at a classified level, looking function by function at our current capabilities, our adversaries' current capabilities, the path of capability development that we're on, the path of capability development that our adversaries are on, and what we've seen as an erosion over the past 10 years, in our judgment, will get to the point where we would suffer significant casualties and significant time delays in meeting our objectives and projecting power in 5 years.
In 5 years. Do you think now that regardless of our intent, we don't have the capability to act unless we change the path we're on?
Senator, I don't think there's any question that unless we change the path we're on, we're going to be at a competitive disadvantage qualitatively
So
and quantitatively.
that's pretty consequential, isn't it?
Senator, to me, it affects our ability to deter conflict. It affects the confidence that our allies have in our ability to meet our commitments. And at the end of the day, it makes it more dangerous world because both nuclear deterrence and conventional deterrence would be affected.
And if we are unable to meet the needs of the force that we have now, that they are incapable or that they are not ready, do you believe that any leader will send that force into battle?
I think it'd be very difficult for a leader to send a force in battle when his military leadership would articulate the risk associated with doing that. I do want to make it clear, I believe we have a competitive advantage over any potential adversary today. And what I'm doing now is projecting into the future based on a trend line that we've seen over the past decade, where we will be if we don't turn it around.
Thank you. And Secretary Mattis, in the last 4 weeks, the United States has conducted 3 strikes against pro-regime forces that threaten coalition's soldiers in Syria. Do I have your assurance that we're going to take any and all measures necessary to protect our forces in that area?
Absolutely, Senator. Those are self-defense strikes, and the commander on the ground has the authority to take whatever action necessary, and I support that.
Okay. And during your confirmation hearing, you talked about how Russia had chosen to be a strategic competitor. And with respect to engagement with Russia, you stated, I'm all for engagement, but we also have to recognize reality and what Russia is up to. And there's a decreasing number of areas where we can engage cooperatively and an increasing number of areas where we're going to have to confront Russia. Do you believe this is still an accurate characterization of Russia's behavior?
I think there are very modest expectations for finding areas of cooperation right now with Russia until they change their behavior.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, first I want to associate myself with the views of 16 former senior military leaders who submitted a letter today in support of foreign assistance, and specifically they made the following point. Quote, proactive conflict prevention strategies are far less expensive in terms of resources and lives expended than reactive use of our armed forces, end quote. And this is signed by a number of folks we'll all recognize, from General Breedlove to Admiral Mullen to General Petraeus to General McChrystal. I think we should keep that in mind when we review the President's budget, which I believe is particularly short-sighted with regard to foreign assistance. I want to move now, Secretary Mattis, to something you said at your confirmation hearing in January. I asked you for your assessment of the key threats to our vital interests and in what priority level, and you said that the principal threats start with Russia. Do you still view Russia as a significant threat to the United States?
Yes, Senator, I do.
Can you walk us through a little bit how this year's budget request invests in the resource areas, the programs, and the initiatives that can help counter those threats posed by Russia?
Yeah, Senator, I think the European Reassurance Initiative alone of $4.8 billion is designed with one target in mind, that is to dissuade Russia from thinking that this is a time when they want to test NATO or the Americans. I would also point out that in terms of technology, we are looking at specific technologies that address some of the maturing threats that they have, air, space, underwater, that sort of thing. And I think, too, that the investment in pre-positioned equipment that allows us to move forces quickly into an area would cause a change in their strategic calculus as far as the risk from their behavior, from their perspective, would go up. There's also a fair amount of ground munitions and airfield enhancements that are going on, specifically targeted to your concern, Senator.
I want to thank you for that. I think those are all very important investments. One of my concerns is that the Russians employed a set of hostile, highly asymmetrical tools during our election last year, and that for the cost of a fraction of a single ship, they were able to use very low-cost tools like hackers, trolls, and social media bots to manipulate our media and even penetrate our political and election structures. Do we have an overall strategy to meet that threat, either in cybercom or as a whole of government approach?
Sir, we have vulnerability assessments and analyses going on that cause us to buttress our defenses in different areas, to shift our filtering of information, and to shift our focus of our intelligence services to define the problems to a level that we can figure out what to do about them. So is there an overall strategy? We are working on a broader strategy that this would be part of, but right now we have enough definition that we don't have to delay taking steps at this time, intel-wise and defenses-wise, against the Russian threat.
Should there be consequences when Russia does this kind of thing?
Well, absolutely. I mean, that's a decision that has to be taken by the Commander-in-Chief, and certainly with the Congress's support, involvement. But I think that this sort of misbehavior has got to face consequences, and not just by the United States, but more broadly.
I couldn't agree more. I want to shift gears a little bit in my last 40 seconds or so. You know my interest in directed energy weapon systems. They have enormous potential to be a game changer, the kind of thing that we've seen change symmetry or asymmetry in the past for our warfighters. Section 219 of last year's defense bill instructs the Secretary of Defense to designate a senior official at the Pentagon to have principal responsibility for the development and transition of directed energy weapon systems. As of today, it's my understanding that this position remains unfilled. Secretary, can I have your commitment today to meet this requirement and to assign someone this critical responsibility at the Pentagon?
Yes, sir. Thanks for bringing it up. I didn't know I had that responsibility. I'm learning more every day, but I will, if that's a responsibility you've assigned, it'll be done. I will tell you that right now I've been briefed on directed energy R&D and advances, and so I know people are working it right now, but if we haven't filled that line number of assignment, I'll get onto it.
I appreciate that very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, gentlemen. I want to associate myself with the remarks about our budget picture that Secretary Mattis had and that Chairman McCain had. I will say I agree with Chairman McCain that I think the President's budget is inadequate to the threats that we face. But the more fundamental problem is the Budget Control Act. And the simple solution, colleagues, is to repeal the Budget Control Act. From Senator Fisher all the way down to my right, and Senator Donnelly all the way down to Senator Peters, not a single one of us was here in the summer of 2011 and voted for that bill. The Budget Control Act is not the Constitution, and the 112th Congress was not the Constitutional Convention. We should simply repeal it. Now, some people say it's going to increase the deficit, but it's not going to go into effect. We know that. We know exactly what will happen. We will have a continuing resolution in September. We will have some kind of 2-year budget in October and November. We will have an omnibus in December of 2017 and an omnibus in December of 2018, and then we'll do it all again in 2019. Let's simply repeal the Budget Control Act and take our responsibilities seriously and own up for our annual budgeting cycle. And I would urge all the Democrats and all the Republicans on this committee to work together to do so in the Senate itself. Now, off my soapbox, Mr. Secretary. The Open Skies Treaty allows for aerial surveillance of military forces. The U.S. and Russia are both parties. However, according to the State Department, Russia has not been playing ball lately. They're denying the United States overflight of certain parts of their territory. I know that we had sought resolution with Russia on these matters, but my understanding is those efforts have come up empty. Do you believe that does the U.S. believe that Russia is in violation of the Open Skies Treaty?
We are meeting on that issue. I've been briefed on it, and we'll be meeting with State Department and national security staff here in the very near future. There certainly appears to be violations of it, but you know, I've got to go into the meeting and figure out that I've got all the information.
Would you care to elaborate in an unclassified manner in this setting on the nature of those violations?
There are areas that have been, we've been prevented from overflying. I think some of the other aspects of it I'd prefer to talk privately with you, but that's one of the clear, to me, violations.
Could we get your commitment to submit response on the record, classified or unclassified as appropriate, once you've had those consultations?
I'd prefer to do it even before I had the consultation. I get it to you right away. I can tell you what we know right now, what we believe right now, and then we can update you later, sir.
That's fine if we could get that on the record in writing. General Dunford, while we're on the topic of Russian treaty violations, our EUCOM commander, General Scaparrotti, testified in March saying, Russia has repeatedly violated international agreements and threats that underpin European peace and stability, including the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty and the Treaty on Conventional Armed Forces in Europe. Do you agree that Russia is in violation of both those treaties?
I do, Senator.
So, let's put this plainly then. If Vladimir Putin wanted, he could hold U.S. troops in Europe at risk with nuclear-armed cruise missiles, and our only choices would be, one, we send 30-year-old F-16s with 30-year-old nuclear weapons against state-of-the-art Russian defenses, or we have a choice to escalate a tactical crisis to a strategic one by responding with long-range bombers or intercontinental missiles or submarine-launched ballistic missiles. Is that the situation we face in EUCOM right now?
Senator, that's a good reason why we've argued to modernize our nuclear enterprise and make sure we have an effective deterrent and effective response.
One of the modernization priorities is the air-launched cruise missile, which is going on 40 years now. General Selva said, quote, a decade from now, outcomes will not be able to penetrate Russian air defenses, and therefore there's an urgency to their replacement. Given Russia's treaty violations and the imbalance between American and Russian nuclear forces and the age of the outcome, do you agree that it's an urgent priority to replace the outcome with the long-range standoff cruise missile?
Senator, as you know, we're going through nuclear posture review right now. What I would say is this. The third leg of the triad, the bomber, needs to be able to penetrate, needs to be able to achieve effects, and that's the criteria that we should have going into the nuclear posture review.
Thank you. To conclude, we had Admiral Harris from PACOM in a few weeks ago as well. He pointed out that although China is obviously not a party to the INF Treaty, if they were, over 90% of their missiles would be banned by it. So the situation that we face is that the INF Treaty gives China a lethal advantage over American forces in the Pacific. Russia is outright ignoring the INF Treaty in Europe. We have no matching response to either of those threats, and even if we did, it would be illegal because we are literally the only nation in the world that restrains itself from developing intermediate-range cruise missiles. Is that right?
Senator, it is, and I think what's important about the Chinese capability is that is in that category of anti-access area denial that we discussed earlier, where the large number of missiles and rockets that they have do present a challenge to us as we try to project power.
Seems a critical strategic problem that we face. I know that you gentlemen are working to address it. I hope that we can do everything possible to help you. Thank you.
And Senator, there's a wide range in the FY18 budget, and frankly, we started in 17, a wide range of capability areas where we requested resources designed specifically for those challenges that you've articulated.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. I want to ask about what's happening between Qatar and its neighbors. Last week, Saudi Arabia severed all diplomatic and economic ties with Qatar, and almost immediately, Bahrain, the UAE, Egypt, and Yemen did the same. This crisis began in part because it was reported that the leader of Qatar gave a speech praising Iran and criticizing other countries in the region. Now it appears that that was fake news and that the leader of Qatar gave no such speech. Now, the media has reported that the FBI believes that it was actually the Russians who planted the story. I don't want to ask a question that depends on classified information. So let me ask this question instead. If the news reports are accurate, what motive would the Russians have had for doing something like that? Mr. Secretary, might you be able to answer that?
I think a disruption of the international order is something that Russia, in a short-sighted way, thinks works to their benefit. I think it does not, but I can't speak for them. I think what you're seeing here, though, is the continued prevalence of threats, not just to our own country, not just to Western Europe democracies, but they're trying to break any kind of multilateral alliance, I think, that is a stabilizing influence in the world.
So, good. And I hope, good in terms of your description, this is very helpful, and I hope we're going to be able to get to the bottom of this. You know, our intelligence agencies have told us that the Russians conducted a successful cyber attack against our 2016 elections. A few months later, the Russians tried to do the same thing in France, and now it appears they're trying to take this to a whole new level. So I'd also, though, like to ask for your help to clarify the U.S. policy on this current dispute. After the Saudis cut off diplomatic and economic ties, the president immediately tweeted his support for the move, saying, and I'm going to quote here, "So good to see the Saudi Arabia visit with the king and 50 countries already paying off." But soon afterwards, Secretary of State Tillerson called on those countries to ease the Qatar blockade, saying it was, quote, hindering U.S. military operations in the region and the campaign against ISIS. Then, in testimony to this committee, the Air Force Secretary contradicted Secretary Tillerson and said that the dispute was, in fact, not impacting air operations at Al Udeid, our base in Qatar. Secretary Mattis, can you please clarify what is the policy of the United States government toward the current dispute among Gulf countries in the Middle East?
Yes, ma'am. Senator, the Secretary of the Air Force was referring to the operations at that one air base.
Okay.
There is more than that going on in the region, so she was quite correct in what she was saying about that. Secretary Tillerson was nonetheless correct as he looked more broadly at the situation where we have to work with many of those what we call Gulf Cooperation Council states together. We have friends in the region, Senator, who have problems. They admit it. One of the issues that came up when President Trump visited Saudi Arabia was their effort to turn off the spread of rabid ideologies that undercut stability and create the kind of the ocean in which the terrorists swim, that sort of thing. So we have friends out there. We've got to work with them. Our policy is to try to reduce this problem, but at the same time, we have got to make certain that we're all working together and there is no funding, whether it be from a state or from individuals in the state who can get away with it because there's a lack of oversight or law or that sort of thing. So there's a lot of passions at play here. It's not tidy as we deal with it.
And I understand that Qatar needs to do more to fight terrorism in the field. And I just want to make sure I clarified the point and understood it correctly. General Dunford, is the Qatar blockade affecting U.S. military operations?
Senator, it is not, and we're watching that very, very closely, but we've had good cooperation from all the parties to make sure that we can continue to move freely in and out of Qatar, where we have both an important air base as well as the headquarters forward of the United States Central Command.
Good. Thank you very much. I just want to say this cyber threat appears to be getting bigger and bigger, more and more dangerous, taking on multiple permutations. I think that means it's really important, and I'm going to ask you later for an update on the status of trying to implement the our cyber command elevation. But this is something we've got to fight back against.
We're on track with elevation.
Good.
ma'am. It's going fine. I don't see any issues there. There's some other things about splitting them that we're working through, but we'll work through it.
Good. Powerfully important. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you for your service to our country. General Mattis, Secretary Mattis, do you see any way that the current budget could be operational with the Budget Control Act still in existence?
I believe Congress is going to have to remove the Budget Control Act in order for that to happen, so for this budget to go through.
Would it be fair to say that a continuing resolution has never saved money with regard to any of the defense programs?
Sir, I guarantee you continuing resolutions cost us more money for less capability.
Last week, Dr. Wilson and General Goldfein talked about the B-21 program and reiterated the importance that it stay on time and on budget. The program ramps up next year from $1.3 billion to $2 billion requested for 2018. I also understand that a CR or a return to BCA funding levels could jeopardize funding for this and ultimately affect the timely fielding of this critical component of our future national security. General Dunford, you just mentioned the fact that we absolutely have to have the long-range strike bomber with regards to our plans for delivering any type of weapons against the upgraded threats of our peer competitors. Would you care to comment on the need for the continuation on a timely basis of the development of the B-21?
Senator, I can't comment on the timing. What I can tell you is we've done 3 nuclear posture reviews since 2010 that I'm aware of. All of them have validated the need for a triad and emphasized the need for a bomber that had assured access. And so completely supportive of that. And I know that General Goldfein and the Secretary of Air Force have testified as to the challenges with the timing of the B-21, and I think they've assured the committee that their leadership will be decisive in that program.
Thank you. Secretary Mattis, for more than a year now, we've talked about cyber and about the need to define policy with regards to cyber attacks within the United States. We've put within the NDAA, the 17 NDAA, a directive that the administration deliver a policy or a proposed policy back to Congress by December of this year. And I believe that since this is coming through the NDA, it's going to fall under your purview to see that it gets done. This would not necessarily identify an act of war, but rather those acts of aggression which are of sufficient duration, similar to what a kinetic attack would be, that it would impact our country. Do you know if that study or that planning is ongoing at this time, or if there is specific direction for individuals within the administration to comply with that NDAA directive?
Sir, I want to get back to you with a detailed answer on that one. I understand the question. I'm not prepared to answer it right now. I know that we've got an awful lot of work going on. We're engaged in the operations, but the specific answer to your question I don't have right now. But I'll get back to you.
Thank you, sir. General Dunford, the need for cyber superiority. I think sometimes when we talk about air, land, and sea and space, sometimes we forget to add in the fact that cyber is connected in all sequences. They're all connected. Could you just share a little bit with the committee about the need to upgrade the cyber capabilities and our ability not only for defense, but to be able to attribute the attacks, to be able not to defend against them, but then to go back in and respond, and one step farther, and that is to be able to survive the attack in such a fashion that we actually can respond afterwards.
Senator, thanks. And first, I would tell you that, as we've analyzed today's conflicts and future conflicts, I would agree with you completely, and we say, really, we used to talk about multi-domain, we now talk about all domain, and you referred to all of them, sea, land, air, space, and cyberspace. And so we do expect cyberspace to be integral to any campaign that we would conduct in the future. The requirements start with making sure that our own network is protected. We provide support to the rest of the government, but our own network is defended to include our command and control systems, and we talked earlier about our nuclear command and control systems. But our mission of defense in the department also requires us to be able to take the fight to the enemy, which is an integral part of any campaign that we would wage. And that requires us, as you suggested, one, to be able to attribute attacks and then provide the President with viable options in response. Although I would tell you the one thing that we emphasize is that just because the enemy chooses to fight in cyberspace doesn't mean our response has to be limited to cyberspace. In other words, we may experience a cyber attack, but we'll take advantage of the full range of capabilities that we have in the department to respond.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses for your testimony and for your service. In March, you each testified before the Defense Subcommittee of Senate Appropriations on a topic that I care deeply about, which is authorization for use of military force in the ongoing effort against ISIS. And the record would reflect, Secretary Mattis, you stated, quote, "I would take no issue with the Congress stepping forward with an AUMF. I think it would be a statement of the American people's resolve if you did so. I've thought the same thing for the last several years, I might add, and have not understood why the Congress hasn't come forward with this, at least a debate, because I believe ISIS is a clear and present danger we face." Testimony of General Dunford on March 22nd, same hearing, quote, "I agree with the Secretary. I think not only would it be a sign of the American people's resolve, but truly I think our men and women would benefit from an authorization of the use of military force that would let them know that the American people, in the form of their Congress, were fully supportive of what they're doing out there every day as they put their lives in harm's way." Is that still an accurate reflection of both your views sitting here today in June?
Yes, it is, Senator, for me.
Absolutely, Senator.
Senator Flake and I are members of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and have introduced an authorization trying to square some difficult circles dealing with these non-state actors, ISIS, the Taliban, al-Qaeda, trying to appropriately exercise congressional oversight without micromanaging functions that are functions for the Commander-in-Chief and his staff. And I would appreciate very much both of you individually, but also the administration generally, trying to work with us. The head of Senate Foreign Relations, Chairman Corker, has indicated a desire to move on this, and we would very much like to work in tandem with you to hopefully get this to a place that will express the congressional resolve that you discussed in this testimony.
Happy to work in concert with you, sir.
Great.
Absolutely, Senator. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. I don't have any other questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I want to clear one thing up. First of all, I have the utmost respect for you guys, and God help us, we've got to have you be successful. But there is zero chance, zero. I'm on the Budget Committee. There's zero chance that the budget process is going to work. The best this year, the best we can hope for is that we will end, we're going to head, there are 43 days, working days left before the end of this fiscal year. We're headed for another CR unless we have an omnibus. So the best thing we can hope for today is an omnibus. The budget process is broken. It's why we're sitting here today. It's why we're at a historic low in terms of spending on our military. And we won't fix this long term. We can argue about $20, $30, $50 billion. I'm going to tell you in a second, I think the number is much bigger than that. I need help on two things. One, help us with an audit. You have my full support. We're going to try to get the money for you, but we've got to have an audit. Second is we need a bottom-up analysis of mission-based need. We're going to hypothesize about how much you need. You've answered questions about it, but I want to give a little history today. In my lifetime, we've disinvested in the military 3 times. This is significant. Once in the 70s, once in the 90s, and once just recently in the last 8 years, such that today we're spending 3.1% of our GDP on our military. The low point was 2.6 in 2000. A lot of people refer back to 2000. That was prior to 9/11, prior to ISIS, prior to all the things that have changed our world in the last 15 years. But we recapped only one time in my lifetime, and that's in the 80s. We called ourselves recapping in the 2000s, but we chewed that up in 16 years of war, as you just said, Secretary. We haven't built new aircraft carriers or submarines or airplanes, and here we are where most of our major platforms are maturing at exactly the same time that we have to rebuild and recap. It's estimated that by 2000, Russia will have 70% of their nuclear triad will be absolutely new technology. It's estimated it'll take us 30 years to get to just 70% there. So we have an estimate here that says that based on the historical average of 4.1%, that's the red line there, the difference between where we were last year at 3.1% and 4.1%, that's 100 basis point on our economy is $200 billion. The other way to triangulate about need is Bob Gates in 2011 put a 5-year mission-based need requirement out, and in 2016 estimated that his estimate for 2016 is $130 billion more than what we have. And then the last one I want to give you is this, and that is, General, you said our mission is to make sure our sons and daughters never have to fight in a fair fight. I agree 100% with that. Historically, though, the country with the biggest economy is always the 800-pound gorilla. Today, China has reached us in purchasing power parity. Their economy is the same size as ours. There's every reason to believe that they're going to continue to outpace us with a population that's 4 times our size. There's no reason to believe that won't continue to happen. My problem is this, is that China this year will spend $826 billion in equivalent money compared to our $677. That's if we get everything you want. So already they're spending more in equivalent terms and we are significantly more. So when I triangulate this, we're somewhere between 130, this is this year, 130 to 200 billion. And that doesn't count the real full recap that we're talking about. And that is, and by the way, Gates did that before ISIS, Crimea, Ukraine, before a lot of the things that we know today. So what we're really looking at here is a situation where over the next 30 years, just the Navy alone, just to rebuild, this isn't operations. It's CBO estimates it's $26 billion. So, Secretary, my question to you is, I know you're a historian. How do we, not just this year, how do we develop a long-term plan to make sure in an environment where every dime we're already spending on the military, the VA, and all domestic programs is borrowed? That's our discretionary spending. That's 25% of what we spend. Every dime of that is borrowed because in the last 8 years we borrowed 35% of what we spent. In the next 10 years, it's projected we'll borrow another 30% of what we are going to spend. In that environment, how do we develop a long-term strategic plan that helps us achieve what the General has said that our mission is? And I agree with that mission, by the way.
Sir, we need to have a strategic dialogue with the Congress and determine what you can do. And at that point, we'll have to adapt the strategy to whatever level of resources you can give us to avoid a strategic mismatch and protect the country.
Sir, with due respect, if you mentioned one time before that you're working on a mission-based estimate now. It's going to take some time to come together, for that to come together. Is that correct?
There's a strategy review underway, sir, yes.
Is that the GIMNA? General Dunford?
Go ahead.
Senator, there's really 2 pieces to this, and we have been involved over the last 18 months in doing a comprehensive analysis of what we're using as benchmarks for the joint force. So we've looked carefully at China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, and then violent extremism as not predictive, as that being the only threats we'll face, but with a key assumption being that if we benchmark our capabilities and capacities against one or combinations thereof of those challenges, we'll have the right force. We've carefully gone through and done a functional analysis that we're going to share with the committee at the top secret level that basically takes a look at our relative competitive advantage or disadvantage by functional area against each one of those challenges, and in the aggregate effect of those competitive areas in our ability to meet our objectives in a conflict. Regardless of where the Secretary goes with the defense strategy, what we intend to do is to provide the Secretary with very clear, you asked for a bottom-up, needs-based prioritization. I believe we're in a position right now to provide the Secretary recommendations for bottom-up, needs-based requirements. And again, what we have done is we've taken all the analytic work that's been done against each one of those problem sets and dissected it so we can make clear recommendations to maintaining our competitive advantage. We've identified where we need to be, 5 years from now, and what specific programs will help us get there. And that's obviously the latter part of that is a work in progress, and we'll continue to review that, constantly. But I feel like for the first time in many years, as a result of an emphasis on net assessments over the last 18 months, we're going to be in a position to have a very good constructive dialogue with the Secretary, and the Secretary will be better empowered to have a good constructive dialogue with the Department, with the Congress, and be able to outline our requirements, and more importantly, the specific impact of either meeting or not meeting those requirements in our ability to achieve our objectives against those states that we're using as a benchmark.
And when could we expect that?
It's available, right now. We've started to talk to the committee about that, Senator, and we're informed now by some detailed work that's already been done on a couple of those problem sets, and the work is actually reflected in this year's budget recommendations.
Yeah, the
Thank you,
briefs
sir.
to
God bless.
me, Senator, allowed me to come forward with the degree of confidence I have about what it is we're asking for and to support the unfunded priorities list that were submitted. This is where I got the background, the rigor to understand the need for it, sir.
Thank you, Chair.
But let me point out again, Mr. Secretary, and I'm not without sympathy, but unless we have a strategy, it is hard for us to implement a policy. And it's now 6 months. And members of this committee, particularly Senator Reid and I, but everybody, we want a strategy. And I don't think that's a hell of a lot to ask. I know that there are problems within the administration, but honestly, what you just said is fine. But what is the strategy? And I don't think that the last 8 years are exactly what we have in mind. So right now, we have a don't lose strategy, which is not winning. And General Dunford, I appreciate very much what you're doing. I remember 2 years ago going over the Pentagon and you telling me about all these studies that are going on. That's fine. Where is it? And I understand that one of the problems is within the administration itself. But please don't tell us that we have a strategy when we don't.
Chairman, we have entered a strategy-free time, and we are scrambling to put it together. But anyone who thinks a strategy, an integrated interagency whole-of-government strategy can be done rapidly is probably someone who hasn't dealt with it. It is, according to Dr. Kissinger, the most complex series of threats that he has ever seen in his lifetime, and he's a master of dealing with these kinds of issues. We're working it. As far as the strategy for Afghanistan, it's coming very shortly. We have broader strategies that we're building on, having to do with NATO and allies in the Pacific. You've seen us engage with those people as we make certain that we're drawing strength from allies too. We're not putting this all on the backs of the American taxpayer, the American military. But it does take a lot of effort to walk into the level of strategic thinking that we found and try to create something that's sustainable.
Senator Shaheen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Secretary Mattis, General Dunford, and Undersecretary Norquist for being here this morning. I would like to continue to pursue the question of strategy, and my question is about strategy in Syria. The map that everyone has at their place and that we just put up on the board is a map that was produced by the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. And this weekend, the Russian Ministry of Defense announced that pro-regime forces have reached the Iraqi border. This comes as Russia-backed forces encircle U.S. troops and their partners in Al-Tanf and seem to raise questions about our strategy to clear ISIS along the Euphrates River Valley. So my question is, were we expecting the Russians to come down and make the move that they did around Al-Tanf and to encircle our troops? And what is our next move because of that?
Senator, as you know, we are in Syria in a defeat ISIS campaign based on the President's decision of about a month ago now when he met with President Erdogan. We have chosen to arm the Syrian Democratic Forces. We had taken out already the Manbij area, which is where the attacks on Brussels and Istanbul and Paris originated. That was taken down. The next move is against Raqqa. We have shifted the operational art to first invest or surround the locations where the enemy is located so that their foreign fighters cannot escape and get home to Europe, to America, to Southeast Asia. That fight, they crossed the line of departure about a week ago, a little less than a week ago, going into Raqqa, and the fighting is now deep inside the city. As far as the At-Tanf situation, that was another operating area that we had. I did not anticipate that the Russians would move there. We knew it was a possibility. I did not anticipate it at that time, but it was not a surprise to our intelligence people who saw the potential for them to move out in that direction. The middle Euphrates River Valley, clearly Assad, thanks to the Russians and the Iranian support, is flexing his muscle. He's starting to feel a little more optimistic about his strategic situation, and certainly they are moving to break through to their garrison that's surrounded at Dar es-Zar.
And I appreciate that. The question, I guess the second question I had was, does that compromise our strategy for clearing ISIS in the Euphrates River Valley?
Well, it certainly is complicated. Let me have the chairman talk about the military situation on the ground there.
And can I also ask you, General Dunford, if you would talk about, deconfliction aside, how we are not working with the Russians in Syria?
I can, Senator. First, without splitting hairs, the media reports of us being encircled are not accurate. And we still have freedom of movement outside of the At-Tanf area, and we're not limited from moving up towards the Euphrates River Valley at this time. And I talk to, as the Secretary does, our commander of the United States Central Command, if not daily, multiple times each day. And so there's not large numbers of forces, pro-regime forces out there. They have, in fact, moved to the border, but they haven't restricted our movement. To that point, our deconfliction mechanism with the regime via the Russians is still effective in allowing us to prosecute the campaign. So
I guess I was asking not about the deconfliction, but about the other ways in which we are or aren't working with the Russians. So I understand that deconfliction efforts are going on.
The only thing we're doing, Senator, with the Russians is communicating with them to deconflict, to ensure the safety of our air crews and our personnel on the ground at the military-to-military level. Meanwhile, Secretary Tillerson is leading an effort dealing with the foreign minister of Russia to take a look at what might be done to address Syria as a whole, to include the political solution. But today, on a day-to-day basis, we have three main mechanisms to communicate with the Russians. We have a direct communication between our Air Operations Center and the Russians on the ground in Syria. We have a three-star channel that's on the Joint Staff. It's my J5 that communicates with his counterpart on the Russian General Staff. And then I speak routinely to the Chief of Defense, General Gerasimov. In fact, I've spoken to him twice in the past week to ensure that we address the safety of our personnel and our ability to continue to prosecute the campaign against ISIS. So to the extent that we're doing more than deconfliction, that's a political dialogue taking place led by Secretary Tillerson. But right now we're completely informed by the NDAA language that restricts any kind of mill-to-mill cooperation with the Russians, limits it to deconfliction in Syria. So we're compliant with the law at this time. And if there is a need to do something more than that, my understanding is that the Secretary of Defense, for national security interest purposes, can waive the requirement and allow us to do more with the Russians if that meets our interests inside of Syria.
Thank you. Can I ask a follow-up question, Mr. Chairman? Thank you. There have been reports about the political efforts that Secretary Tillerson is undertaking through Tom Shannon to go to St. Petersburg, and the news reports have suggested that that could involve our exchanging sanctions, the removal of the Russian DACAs, the facilities that we seized back in December in the U.S., and have you and Secretary Mattis, have you been consulted about what's being proposed there, and is Are you troubled by the idea that we're going to do these exchanges without having any proof that Russia's changing their behavior?
I've not talked to Secretary Tillerson about that, ma'am. We have extensive talks every week, mostly every day. That has not been one of the issues that I've brought up with him or he's brought up with me. I stay more on the military factors, like what your map lays out here, that sort of thing.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sure it didn't go unnoticed, the people coming and leaving. We're having 3 hearings going on at the same time, so I'll be very brief. I was here for your opening statement, Secretary Mattis, and you said that you came back out of retirement and you were shocked at what you saw, and you've been very upfront. You've made the statement that for decades America has been uncontested, and that's no longer the case now. So times are different now, and I do think it's great very effective for the uniforms to be talking about this. You know, I can't do that. Those of us up here don't have the credibility that you have when you're speaking from your vast experience. We are facing, in my opinion, the greatest threat this country has ever faced. And so when we talk about that and we look at the attention that our military has been getting, I go back to 1965 when 52% of the total federal spending was on defense, and then that is slowly degraded down to today when it's 15%. So when it gets right down to it, is a lot of this the fact that we have just not prioritized the military budget. I mean, we're faced with something, the threat is great, and you know, when you have people like General Milley coming out and saying that he did in the Army posture hearing last month, he said we're outranged and outgunned. You know, we're being very honest with the American people. But do you think we've just gotten to a point over a period of time where we are not giving the proper priorities to defending America?
Senator, I know there were a lot of contributing factors, but I don't know how we can restore the strength that we all know that we need if we don't start with the repeal of the BCA and at least open the door to effective action by the Congress oversight and funding. Right now, it's like we've tied ourselves up in a knot.
Yeah, you agree with that, General?
Senator, I do. I mean, we have to benchmark our military capabilities against our national interests and the threats that we face. And I think what we're trying to do is paint a picture where we have a disconnect. We're in a trend where the military capabilities and capacities we have are insufficient to meet our national interests in the context of the threat that has grown. As Secretary Mattis said, Secretary Kissinger, and I've used this expression many times, describes this as the most volatile and complex period since World War II. And certainly, sitting where I sit, I couldn't agree more with that assessment.
Well, and you know, if you look at just single out end strength, and I was looking at at a chart that you may have in front of you, I don't know, but you take out the reserve and the National Guard and the Guard, and just take the Army active, the Air Force active, Navy active, and Marine active. You have made statements, or the administration has made statements, for example, that the Army active needs to be at about 540,000, and yet this budget is coming up with 476, a static figure from fiscal year 17. Then the same thing is true with the Air Force. It's we talked about the necessity for having 361, and it's at 325, and the same at Navy, and the same with the Marines. So I would just ask if we've talked about how adequate the budget is. Do you really think it is adequate in terms of end strength? We're not meeting the goals that apparently you were in on the decision. Both of you were somewhat in on the decision as to where we should be in the 4 services on just end strength alone. What am I overlooking here?
Senator, I believe what we face right now is the reality that we're already asking you to bust the BCA cap by $52 billion. We're trying to be informed by the reality of what the law says, but at the same time, we're not being shy at telling you where we're really at, in terms of what we need. But I think we need to work together and come up with a solution here, because I don't know how I would bring something to you that laid out a budget for what you've pointed out here, when the BCA cap, I would have to completely ignore this, and I'm ignoring it already to the tune of $52 billion. Well, the President is with the budget he's submitted, and it just seems to me that we've got to have the kind of discussion that Senator Perdue, that Chairman McCain, Senator Reid have brought up, and get a grip on reality here, because it's like we're all walking around as if we're victims.
Yeah, well, you're right, and I appreciate the answer, and we have to do all we can. And I still think it's right back to priorities, and a lot of people out there in the real world agree with you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Let me just point out again, Mr. Secretary, a 3% increase over the Obama proposed budget is not enough. So whether we do away with BCA or not, and that's our problem. Our problem with you is that it's a 3% increase over the Obama administration. Everybody agrees that that's not enough. So if we're going to bust the BCA, then why don't we bust it to what we really need, rather than come forward here and complain all about the BCA when what you're asking for is not sufficient. At least that's the view of the military commanders that I have talked to. Senator Donnelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank our witnesses for being here with us. As leaders, you both made a strong commitment to improve the mental health and resiliency of our service members and their families. I appreciate your leadership on this issue. As we've discussed before, in Section 701 of the FY15 NDAA, Congress passed what we call the Sexton Act requirement, which requires every service member, active guard or reserve, receive a robust mental health assessment every year. The Department has said in the past that the Sexton Act requirement would be fully implemented across all services by October 2017. Secretary Mattis, will this be fully implemented by October of 2017?
I don't know right now, Senator. I will get back to you with the best estimate I can give you. As you are no doubt aware, that's a significant requirement. It's a very labor-intensive requirement for the number of mental health professionals that would be needed to do that. But let me get back to you and tell you where we're at on meeting that deadline date.
That would be great. It's critically important. Also, Secretary Mattis, we discussed one time the challenges with a proper transition. General Corelli has worked on this extensively, on the handoff from active duty to the VA in regards to the formulary and in regards to making sure that it's a smooth transition. Are the Department and the VA working closely on this, and do you think progress is being made at this time? Because what's happened sometimes, not to get too off script or whatever, is a lot of active duty, when they become vets, medicines that they're dependent on that are critically important are not available when it flips over to the VA side, or a different one is handed off, which causes significant problems. And I want to make sure that the transition, that the DOD and the VA are working tightly together to get this done properly.
Sir, I believe both the committees will be briefed very soon, both VA and this one be briefed very soon. We have made significant progress on electronic health record. That's actually one of the contributing factors to how we will do this right. And we have, I believe right now, according to people who have been involved in this for many years, in one case over 2 decades, we've never had a closer relationship between DOD and VA targeted right at this transition, the records and the formularies.
And I want to ask a little bit about Afghanistan, follow up what the Chairman was asking. You've both done extraordinary work there over the years. Some years ago, I was with the Marine MEU out in the Helmand province and tried to figure out the strategy. They were doing an extraordinary job, but it almost seemed like a a place put down in the middle of Taliban highway in every other direction. And so as we look at this, what does success in the next, I know we're waiting for the plan, but what does success look like a year from now in your view? What in your mind makes the situation better?
Sir, I believe that the violence will be reduced significantly, especially in the population centers where most of the people live, that the Afghan government got a degree of integrity in what it is contributing to its people, the government services. The corruption has been driven down, but most of all, that the Taliban no longer has the freedom of movement that we're seeing right now. It's been rolled back.
General?
Senator, I'd probably add to that, too, the mitigation of Afghan casualties. That's been a great concern in 2015 and 16 is the numbers of casualties that the Afghan forces have experienced. I think one of the ways that we get after that is by more effectively assisting them both in planning operations and delivering combined arms, most specifically the aviation capability. So continuing to grow their aviation capability and providing them support while they grow their aviation capability will be a key piece of mitigating casualties.
Do you think we're in better shape now than we were last year at this time, or do you think it's gone backwards?
I don't assess that we're in better shape than we were last year, Senator.
Right. General Mattis?
I think Taliban had a good year last year, and they're trying to have a good one this year, sir. I think we may be able to, by a change in some of our concepts of operations, help them with air support and fire support. That'll put the enemy on the back foot. Right now, I believe that the enemy is surging right now.
Well, we look forward to the report, and I would still love to talk to both of you or one of you or your team about Raqqa and some of the situation about some of the Indiana folks there. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being here today. We appreciate your advice to this committee and your service to our great United States. And Secretary Mattis, open invitation to Ruck March with Team Ernst at any time. Anytime. Vice Chief of Army and I solved most of the world's problems this morning. We just need you to fill in the gaps. So you're welcome at any point. Gentlemen, a counter-ISIS strategy in Southeast Asia is something that I've continued to push for, which was why I was excited to hear that this weekend U.S. Special Operations Forces were assisting the government of the Philippines in taking back the ISIS-held town of Marawi. Until 2014, we used to have a sizable counterterrorism mission in the Philippines, and we have known about this threat for a very long time, and unfortunately, we haven't returned to that area in order to counter some of ISIS's bad deeds. So, General Dunford, as we target a terrorist enemy that wishes to strike our homeland, how does our counterterrorism commitment in the region also help ward off other adversaries like China and Russia?
Senator, you want me to hit those two separately? First of all, with Southeast Asia, in addition to the Republic, in addition to our presence in the Philippines with the counterterrorism, the Congress funded what's called the Maritime Domain Awareness Initiative, and that helps countries in the region, specifically Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines, to have a common understanding of the maritime domain, particularly the flow of foreign fighters, criminals, and those kinds of things. The other thing that we have done is we have incorporated Southeast Asian nations into what we call Operation Gallant Phoenix. That's our intelligence and information sharing architecture, which allows us to take a trans-regional approach to violent extremism. Separately, our forward presence in the Pacific, to include the fielding of our most modern capabilities, the P-8, the F-22, the F-35, and our routine Pacific presence operations are designed to deter conventional conflict, and specifically conventional conflict with China and North Korea in the region.
Do you see that as being effective also in the areas of Malaysia and Indonesia?
In terms of deterring conventional conflict, I do, and I view the most dangerous threats in Malaysia and Indonesia to be the threat of violent extremism.
Okay, so ISIS-oriented.
Senator, if I could just add one point here. We have talked about the lack of strategy earlier. In 2014, we canceled the named operation that we had down there, perhaps of a premature view that we were gaining success. Without that, we lost some of the funding lines that we would have otherwise been able to offer. So what the chairman has brought up is completely correct, but it again shows the lack of strategy that we inherited there. I just got back from Shangri-La, where the chairman and other members of the Congress were, and this came up, and we are working closely with them, the Philippines right now, for example, with both manned and unmanned aircraft as they try to retake Marawi there in Mindanao. So this is an ongoing issue. What you're bringing up, I think, is going to loom larger if we were having this hearing a couple months from now. So we've got to take steps that get this back under control and support Indonesia, Malaysia, and Philippines along the lines that your questioning leads us to.
Yes, and thank you for bringing up the Shangri-La dialogue, Mr. Secretary. While you were there, the other countries that participate in that dialogue, what type of support are they looking at coming from the United States? What can we offer them?
Yes, ma'am. Much of it is along the lines of what the chairman just mentioned with Operation Gallant Phoenix. It's getting the intelligence and sharing the information where everything from Interpol to all the secret services of various nations work together so that transnational threats are tracked when they go over the nation's borders, when they flee from one to another. Gallant Phoenix is critical. Also, other intelligence help. And I would add there that that's where our strategy of working by, with, and through allies helps take the load off us. For example, Singapore has offered ISR in surveillance aircraft to Philippines. That's the way we need to get everybody working together out there against this threat and not carrying the full load ourselves.
Thank you. Just very briefly, because I am nearly out of time, our special operators have a dwell time of about 1-to-1 ratio. This was mentioned by General Votel in one of our conversations recently. What can we do? And I'll tell you, it's because they want that. I mean, they won't say no when they are given a mission, and I think that's incredibly important that they stand up to their obligations. But what can we do to increase their dwell time beyond expanding their forces? Is there a way we can push their talents out to the conventional forces?
Some of these missions, due to our conventional forces capability today compared to 2001, we have now Army infantry, Army brigades, Marine battalions that can pick up some of these missions, take the load off, take the work off of the special operators and that sort of thing. Where you want relationships, we still want to use the special operations forces. Chairman, do you have anything to add?
The only thing I'd say, Senator, is the Secretary actually directed me several weeks ago to do an analysis of all of our special operations requirements today and look for opportunities to substitute with conventional forces for exactly the reason you're talking about. We are concerned about the deployment to dwell ratio, which is not only a factor from a human perspective in families, it also precludes them from training for the full range of missions that we may require them for. And we don't want them, as you know, to be singularly focused on the current fight. We want them to be prepared, just like the rest of the force, to be prepared to support us across the spectrum.
Absolutely. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for your extraordinary service to our nation and all the men and women under your command, and thank you for being so forthright and helpful in your answers today to our questions. I want to ask about the F-35s, which are on the unfunded priority list. I believe there are 24 of them. Would you support including them, assuming that you receive additional funds from the Congress?
You mean the support that goes with the aircraft to make them fully capable?
Correct, and the additional aircraft as well.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And as to helicopters, I've written a letter, a bipartisan letter, along with a number of my colleagues, to the appropriators asking for an additional $327 million to fully fund the 60 helicopters that are necessary to reach the state of readiness for our National Guard that they have asked to be. Would you support that as well, assuming that the Congress provides the funding?
I'd have to look at the priorities we place, more broadly, but I mean, it sounds reasonable, so I'd have to look at it in particular.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
A number of our military leaders, past and present, have characterized the greatest threat to this nation as being cyber warfare. And there was a report in the Washington Post just yesterday, as a matter of fact, that hackers allied with the Russian government, you may have seen the report, have devised a cyber weapon that essentially has the potential to disrupt our electronic grid, completely cause chaos in our electric systems that are vital to daily life in this country. An alarming report. Have you seen it, and do you agree that it's accurate?
I have seen it. I believe that this threat is real, and none of us are ignoring this threat at all. There's a lot more going on in this regard, sir, that I can discuss in a private setting.
I would appreciate that opportunity. Would you agree with me that, and with others, that cyber is one of the greatest threats, perhaps the greatest threat in terms of warfare today?
It's certainly one of the tops, sir, because it cuts across all the domains, air, surface, impacts our nuclear command and control, but certainly our very institutions, whether it be democratic or banking or whatever, are vulnerable to this sort of attack.
Would you agree that the Russian hacking and cyber attack on our systems during the last election was an act of war?
I'd leave I know it was a hostile act. Whether or not it crosses the threshold for war, sir, I'm not a lawyer, but there's no doubt it was a hostile act directed against our country.
Would you agree with me that we need a better definition and a policy, and it may involve lawyers or others? I'm not sure lawyers are the best to define it, but wouldn't you agree that we need a better policy defining what is an act of war in the cyber domain?
I think clarity in this regard would help in terms of deterrence and response. Absolutely.
I want to, in my remaining time, focus on an area that is extraordinarily important to our nation, even though it's not the kind of glamorous, shiny toy area that attracts the most attention. President Trump's budget cuts the Department of Labor's worker training budget by 36%. At a time when we are working to modernize our military with particular emphasis on the nuclear triad, the Department of Defense will be relying on the defense industrial base to recruit and hire and train thousands of workers across the country. In my own state of Connecticut, at Pratt & Whitney, thousands of workers to build the engines that are necessary for the Joint Strike Fighter. At Electric Boat, thousands of workers necessary to build the submarines that are so essential to our national security. And yet, we are cutting the funding necessary for training those workers. The welders, pipe fitters, engineers, designers, people with real skills that are essential to our national defense. Would you agree with me that our national security really requires that funding be restored?
Sir, I believe there is a need for the kind of people you're referring to. There's an apprenticeship program I know Department of Labor is starting. I do not know the details of it, but it's directed exactly at the skills that you've just been citing. But I cannot tell you more about it other than to say that that would probably be the best place to get information about what's actually in the President's budget to address this.
I know the Labor Department's budget is out of your direct jurisdiction, but it affects our military capability. And my time has expired, but this subject is intensely important to the future of our nation, and I hope that you will support efforts to increase the funding necessary for apprenticeship and training and other such skill enhancement programs. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Mattis, you famously said as a Marine Corps commander that if you cut the State Department's budget, you need to buy me more ammo. Do you still stand behind that idea?
Well, it was probably a rather simplistic way to point out that we have to engage with whole of government. And yes, sir, I still stand by the theory.
Believe soft power is an essential ingredient to winning the war on terror?
I think America has two powers of fundamental power, sir, the power of inspiration, power of intimidation. You have to work together, and State Department represents inspiration overseas.
Do you agree with that, General Dunford?
I do, Senator.
And Ms. Norquist, has anybody asked you a question yet?
Senator Perdue made a reference to the audit, but I think the time ran out before
Well,
we
I'm
got
going
to
to give you a
answer.
question, but you got to be quick.
Okay.
Where will TRICARE costs be in terms of DOD spending in the next decade?
Where will which cost be?
TRICARE.
I don't have those numbers at my fingertips, sir, but I know that the overall is $51 billion for all of the defense health costs.
Well,
right
look at it, because I think you're going to find it to be really encroaching on the defense budget. We need TRICARE reform.
Correct. The health care costs of defense have gone up significantly year after year.
All right, thank you. General Dunford, when we liberate Mosul, and I'm sure we will, would you recommend a residual force to stay behind of Americans?
Senator, I do believe the Iraqis is going to need support after Mosul, but I would also point out that the end of Mosul is not the end of combat operations in Iraq as well.
Absolutely.
Much more work to be done.
Right. So the day that we get to end the combat operations, is it your testimony as Chairman of the Joint Chiefs that we'd be wise as a nation to leave a residual force to prevent ISIL and other radical groups from coming back?
My assessment is that support for the Iraqis would be strategically important.
To the United States?
To the United States.
Do you agree with that, Mr. Secretary?
I do, sir.
Do you agree that from a homeland security point of view, the outcome in Afghanistan matters in terms of whether it's a failed state or a stable country?
Yes, Senator, I do.
Do you believe that every soldier serving in Afghanistan today, American soldiers, an insurance policy against another 9/11?
An insurance policy
against another 9/11 coming from Afghanistan?
Oh, yes, absolutely, sir.
Do you agree with that, General Dunford?
I do, Senator.
If anybody falls in the service of their country in Afghanistan, they died to protect the homeland.
I don't think there's any question, and I'd also point out, I believe strongly that the pressure that we have put on terrorist groups inside of Afghanistan over the last 15 years is the reason we haven't seen another 9/11 from
Matter of
that
fact,
part
it's
of the
one of
world.
the best purchases you could have in terms of dealing with international terrorism is Afghanistan. You agree with that, both of you? It's a good place to be in terms of countering international
The
terrorism.
center of international terrorism, sir, and the number of groups there, and we've got to confront them there.
All right, thank you very, very much. Saudi Arabia. Do both of you support the arms deal to Saudi Arabia negotiated by President Trump?
I do, sir.
Do you, General Dunford?
Senator, that's really a policy decision. I'll defer to the Secretary.
Okay, militarily, you have no. Do you think it'd be wise for us to help Saudi Arabia?
The only military judgment consideration is how does that fit into qualitative military edge for the Israelis, and it's been looked at through that lens. It's not a challenge.
All right, let's get back to this right quick, General Mattis. If Congress rejects this arms deal, what message are you sending to Iran?
I believe Iran would be appreciative of us not selling those weapons to Saudi Arabia.
And the type weapons we're talking about selling would make Saudi Arabia more effective on the battlefield in places like Yemen, not less, because of the precision nature of the weapons?
With proper training, it can have that effect, yes, sir.
Okay. North Korea. Is it the policy of the Trump administration to deny North Korea the capability of building an ICBM that can hit the American homeland with a nuclear weapon on top? Is that the policy?
Yes, it is, Senator Graham.
And that policy has to have all options on the table to be meaningful, including the military option.
That's correct, sir.
And the military option would be devastating for the world at large, but the President and you have to balance the interest of homeland security against regional stability. And do you think China gets it this time that we're serious about stopping North Korea?
I have no doubt that China thinks we're serious about stopping North Korea, sir, and it's principally a diplomatic-led effort right now to try to denuclearize the peninsula.
Last question. What signal would we be sending to Russia if Congress failed to act for punishing them, if Congress failed to push back against Russia's interference in our election? If we gave Russia a pass, what message would that send to Putin? What message does that send to our allies? And what would you recommend that the Congress do about Russian aggression? Do you support more sanctions?
Sir, I believe that we've got to make very clear what behavior we want to see in the international community and what behavior we will not stand for. And we need to make that clear in the Congress, in the executive branch, and in our alliances.
You agree with that, General Dunford?
Senator, I do. Although having spoken to Secretary Tillerson, I would hope that anything we do with regard to Russia would be done in conjunction with the State Department. And meanwhile, I can assure you we're preparing for the military dimension of the problem.
With a 3% increase over the Obama administration's defense appropriations, we're going to take care of all those things. Is that right, General?
Chairman, I was responding to the Russia challenge, and I think the FY18 budget has given us some significant resources to deal with the Russia challenge.
So 3% is sufficient in your view?
Chairman, all I can tell you is that the prioritization within the top line that we've been given is the right prioritization. And as I indicated earlier, I believe the requirements that the services have provided over and above the budget are legitimate requirements.
So 3% is enough, huh?
Chairman, I also stipulated that I believe we need a minimum of 3% just to maintain the competitive level we have right now. The Secretary, and I subscribe to this, has indicated we need at least 5% for several more years to come before we can be competitive.
Senator Nelson.
Mr. Chairman, Senator King has to go to a funeral, so he asked for 2 minutes of my time, if I may give that to him.
Senator King.
Thank you. Just a couple of points, Mr. Chairman, and I think it's important, and I hate to be bringing more bad news, but in thinking about our budget and the budget future, the looming threat that I see, in addition to all those we've discussed today, is interest rates. An easy way to think about this, 1 point of increase in the interest rate on our national debt equals the Air Force. The entire Air Force budget would be encompassed in a 1% increase in interest rates. 3% would encompass the entire defense budget. 5% would encompass almost the entire current discretionary budget. And I don't think there's any doubt that interest rates are headed up. So that's an additional factor that we have to think about in terms of our development of the budget. Secondly, there's what I call the modernization bulge coming, which CBO estimates to be $400 billion over the next 10 years. That's for the B-21, the Columbia submarine, and the Ohio replacement, B-21, and then the whole nuclear. So that's another problem that we have to deal with and still maintain current budget levels. So I think the situation is even more grim than what we've talked about this morning because of those additional factors that aren't generally discussed in terms of this. We've talked a lot about unconventional war threats that we're facing, cyber, and the attack on our electoral system, clearly attacks. We haven't talked about hybrid war, and I worry that Crimea is a precursor of a way, for example, to attack the Baltic states without tanks rumbling across the border. And finally, Mr. Norquist, I hope that you will take very seriously the necessity for the audit, which we've been hearing about for years. And I think, as I recall, 2017 was supposed to be the year the Department of Defense was ready. So my folks in Maine say, how can they possibly do this without an audit? And I hope that to have a report back from you, and perhaps we can have a hearing just on that. So those are the points that I wanted to make, and I wanted to thank you, gentlemen, for your testimony today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Nelson.
And thank you for your public service. I want to follow up on the quote that Senator Graham quoted you with regard to the State Department. Are we giving up options that were previously available to us to exercise before we reach an armed conflict by a budget that is substantially cutting the State Department and other agencies of soft power such as USAID?
Senator Nelson, I have not looked in detail at the State Department, but I can't tell you what is actually being cut and what is being retained. I'd have to direct that to Secretary Tillerson. It's just I'm not competent to answer it.
Well, I would suggest that you look at it because if you're supporting a budget that whacks the State Department and USAID, you well know you are not only a warrior, you're a diplomat as a commander who utilizes all those other agencies of government in projecting your soft power. And this is a budget that substantially decreases the State Department and USAID. So I understand the sensitivity. You don't want to answer that, but that's going to be something you're going to have to face. Let me ask you about, are you satisfied in your statements with regard to the U.S. support of Article 5 in the NATO treaty? Are you satisfied that you have assured our allies that America supports Article 5?
I have, sir, and I believe the President has just recently done so right from the White House.
Was it in his speech and he took it out when he was over there?
I think he believed that by being there, those actions spoke louder than any words, but he has put it in his speech since then, as you know, here just in the last couple of days.
All right, let me ask you about, do you think that the existing sanctions are enough to deter further Russian aggression in Ukraine and Syria? The sanctions against Russia?
Sir, it's hard to tell what influences Putin. I think that he's not acting in the best interest of the Russian people, and as such, I think that whatever the Congress does, so long as it leaves some flexibility to our Secretary of State and our President to negotiate as we try to get out of this spiral that's going downhill, you know, make the point about where you stand, sir, but leave some flexibility in execution to those who have to diplomatically engage and try to reverse this.
Would additional economic sanctions against Russia help, in your opinion?
I think if they were conditioned on failure of the diplomats to gain some kind of common approach to get out of the jam that Russia is putting everyone in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
On behalf of Chairman McCain, Senator Sullivan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and gentlemen, thank you for your service. You know, there's been a lot of discussion today about the budget and a continuing resolution. And one of the issues that seems to be forgotten here is last year we actually, the Appropriations Committee, Defense Approps, voted out of committee almost unanimously a defense budget. And unfortunately, it came to the floor last summer right around this time, and it was filibustered. So if we did that again, Secretary Mattis, would that be helpful to have a defense budget that we worked on, voted out of committee, and then be filibustered? Is that helping our troops if that happens again? I certainly hope it doesn't happen again, but I'm just trying to get your view on it.
I think it'd be horrible for our country as well as our troops, sir.
You know, Secretary Mattis, I really appreciate your focus on the Asia-Pacific. I know it wasn't lost on our key allies in the region that was your first trip as a secretary, and your recent visit to Singapore with the Shangri-La dialogue I also think was important for a whole host of reasons. Sorry I couldn't have joined you. I had a event that was even more important than the Shangri-La Dialogue, which was a high school graduation of one of my daughters. Otherwise, I would have been with you. I read your speech and the Q&A afterwards. I thought it was outstanding. Can you succinctly state U.S. policy as it relates to freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea and other areas, just so both our allies and adversaries are aware of it?
Yes, sir. We operate freely in international waters, and we do not accept unilateral inhibitions on the international waterways and their use or airways.
And are we going to continue to do that on a regular basis with our allies if possible?
We will unilaterally or in league with our allies, yes, sir.
So I read in the press the USS Dewey conducted a FONOPS near Mischief Reef within the 12 nautical miles, and we even conducted military-type training, a man overboard mission, according to the press reports. The Chinese, according to press reports, protested that. What was our response in response to their protest?
To reiterate that we operate in international waters, sir.
I also very much appreciated your focus, and General Dunford, your focus on the importance of our allies. You highlighted that quite well in your Shangri-La Dialogue speech. Can you just touch on that again for the committee's benefit and the benefit of the American people, just how important our allies are, not only in the Asia-Pacific, but globally in terms of us securing our national security objectives?
Senator Sullivan, there's an awful lot of talk about asymmetric advantages and competitive advantages and disadvantages, and I would put our allies and our alliances from NATO to the Pacific, bilateral, multilateral, as our asymmetric advantage, especially if you put a list of our allies alongside a list of China's allies or Russia's alliances. You can see the proof coming through from history that nations with allies thrive and those without them do not thrive.
So we're an ally-rich nation, and our adversaries and potential adversaries are ally-poor. Is that one way to look at it?
That's a perfect way to look at it.
And so we should be working to deepen those alliances and expand them, correct?
Absolutely.
And do you think everybody in the administration gets that and is doing that?
As you know, sir, Secretary Tillerson and I work very closely together exactly along these lines. He leads foreign policy. I provide military factors and buttress his efforts. And I also know that in terms of Homeland Security, Secretary of Homeland Security Kelly is working with our closer allies around the hemisphere, but also further out to try and protect the country. So I see it being a theme that is being carried forward. Yes, sir.
Let me just finish up, maybe follow up on a couple questions Senator Graham asked about North Korea. And I actually very much appreciated what the President and Vice President did when they invited 100 U.S. Senators over to the White House to get the briefing with the President there, the Vice President, H.R. McMaster, and all of you. I thought that was actually very useful, very important. One element that I thought was very important was that you were clearly trying to get the Congress in a bipartisan way to be supportive of this new strategy. And I think, as you know, Mr. Secretary, our country's at its most powerful when the executive branch, legislative branch are working together on difficult issues, when Democrats and Republicans are working closely together on difficult issues, which is why I thought what the President did that day, inviting everybody over to hear about our strategy firsthand from you and others, and General Dunford, was so important. Is a nuclear ICBM armed in North Korea the most significant threat we face right now as a nation?
It's certainly the one that's in the hands of a potential rogue state that we have to consider.
And is it increasing? Increasing. That threat is increasing, heightening.
No doubt, every test we assume they're learning from it. Sir.
Do we need more missile defense capabilities for our nation?
Right now, I believe we can protect the nation, but as we look to the future, absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I might have a few follow-ups if there's time.
Thank you, Senator Sullivan. On behalf of Chairman McCain, Senator Peters, please.
Thank you, Senator Reid, and thank you to our witnesses today. Appreciate this very interesting, informative testimony. Secretary Mattis, in your testimony, you describe rapid technological change as an important force acting on the department. In fact, I believe you highlighted it as one of the 4 major forces that we have to confront. And you and I have had the opportunity in my office to talk about how robotics and autonomous systems, artificial intelligence, all these other technologies will fundamentally change warfare in the next 10 years, perhaps much sooner than that. The private sector is leading on many of these developments. For example, Ford Motor Company, General Motors will likely have a production self-driving automobile in the next 4 to 5 years out in the marketplace, which is much sooner than most people, I think, realize. And Secretary Mattis, you state in your testimony, in fact, that much of this technological change will come from the commercial sector may expose it to state competitors and non-state actors. So I'm concerned that in recent years, China has strategically weaponized investment and joint ventures in the United States as a method of improving its capabilities and obtaining advanced U.S. technology. The Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, or CFIUS, is the U.S. government entity responsible for vetting foreign investment in the U.S. for national security risk. But I'm concerned that CFIUS is both outdated and overburdened and may not be really up to the challenges that we're facing today. Admiral Rogers testified last month before this committee that our adversaries understand our CFIUS structure and its limitations, and some nation states have actually changed their investment methodology to get around the process that we have in place. So my question is both to you, Secretary Mattis, and General Dunford. Is there a national security benefit to taking a tougher line against certain types of investment from nations that pose a clear threat to our national security, like China?
Absolutely, there is. I completely agree with your view that CFIUS is outdated, sir, and needs to be updated to deal with today's situation.
General?
I couldn't agree more, Senator, and I think of the many challenges that we look at very carefully, the theft of intellectual property, particularly as it pertains to defense programs, is of great concern.
Yeah, if we go through some reforms of CFIUS, which I'm in the process of working with Senator Cornyn and others to do that, are there any specific recommendations that you would have for us in changing the CFIUS process?
Senator Peters, let me send you a note that outlines some. I would tell you right up front that there is a lack of restrictions on investment in certain types of technology that we must have put in place. But I can give you a more inclusive list of where our thinking is at on this if you just give me a couple days, sir.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. That would be very, very helpful. And in closing, given the fact that this is one of our major threats that we have to face, which is rapid technological change, and in the list that you put in your opening testimony, are there any particular technologies that you are most concerned about and ones that we need to be investing more in our own capabilities? This is to both Secretary Mattis and to General Dunford.
Sure. Let me come back to you again in private. I'd prefer, these are areas that are very sensitive, and I don't want to let our adversaries know which ones we're looking at, but we'll be wide open. We'll explain exactly what we're looking at, sir.
Well, I understand that, and I appreciate that. General, I assume that's your same position.
Absolutely, Senator.
Good. Well, I'll look forward to working with both of you. Thank you.
I know the Chairman has mentioned this several times, but I think repetition matters in terms of getting this message out to the American people. The President said that he was going to have historic increases in defense spending. At one point, the President said he was going to expand the Army from 480,000 to 540,000. It's my understanding, as the Chairman has mentioned, that in fact the President's request for the military was exactly 3% higher than President Obama's. And furthermore, I assume you all agree that it calls for 0 additional soldiers, correct?
That's correct right now.
So does he not know that this is not a historic request? Does he not know that, I mean, what I worry about is the American people are being told over and over again, well, we're going to have a really big, I mean, we're going to fund our military. Our military, this is a huge increase in requests. And the reality is so different than the rhetoric coming out of the White House, Mr. Secretary. And I worry that the American people won't understand that we haven't even begun to do what we need to do in terms of bringing our combat brigades to where they need to be. I hate to sound like a me too. I think I have to be a mini-me to you, Mr. Chairman. But I'm worried that there is a misrepresentation going on.
Well, Senator, if you look at the $30 billion we asked for as fast as we came in to address immediate readiness problems, and I would just call it the situation that we've inherited that demands more, we're trying to put together a coherent program on the run while we're engaged overseas, while we have numerous crises unfolding, while we're still getting people approved through the Senate, nominated to the Senate, and get the consent of the Senate to get them in. There's a fair number of things going on at one time. That's not to say we shouldn't continue to work along the lines that we are together, but I've got to come to you with a coherent plan where I can confidently say that the money you throw into this is going to be spent wisely. I do not say that we are asking for enough money in this budget. That's why we have a 5-year program coming to you.
I appreciate, and I know you're in a difficult position. I just think it doesn't help our cause in terms of adequately funding our military if the President is giving the country the impression that he is. And that's the point I was trying to make. In addition to the strategy the Chairman's asking for Afghanistan, I'm awaiting the strategy on ISIS, which was supposed to be ready 30 days after the President took office. We still don't have that. And then finally, what I want to turn to is strategy on cyber. I'm really worried. We spent a lot of time worrying about the Russians hacking politicians. I'm worried about the Russians hacking our military and doing the things they're doing in terms of planting stories and gathering information. Fancy Bear, who has been identified by our intelligence and all of the intelligence experts as one of the premier agents of Russia in terms of cyber warfare, of the people that Fancy Bear has targeted outside of the former Soviet Union, 41% of them are either current or former members of the military, according to a recent analysis. Russia hacked the Twitter account of Central Command. We know that Russia has co-opted a very well-known veteran site that originally began in America. I don't want to use the name of it because it will chase people to the site, and it's totally been co-opted as a Russian proxy. In fact, the Americans who began the site, they were seen in video at a meeting of the folks they're working with in Damascus, and the big, giant, oversized pictures behind them were of Assad and Putin. And this is a site that is asking veterans to helping them find jobs, ostensibly helping them find help for cancer treatment. Veterans are giving personal information to this site. We know that attractive women are going on Facebook, and in the old days, you'd send a spy into a bar that the military frequented and try to gain relationships one drink at a time, as this recent article pointed out. But now they can do it through a Facebook page. So are you all hands on deck as it relates to the way military personnel and veterans, I know General Breedlove, they went after him. Are you all really paying attention to the corrosive ability of Russia to influence our military through direct contact through social media with our veterans through these proxy sites?
I know that training is probably the #1 way to armor our people against this sort of thing, and training is perishable. It's got to be ongoing. I have no complacency about this. I'll see if the chairman has anything to offer, but I'd just point out that we have funded Cyber Command. We've got all sorts of things going on with NSA that keeps us posted, puts protections, firewalls into place. We've blocked a number of times, as you've seen, malicious malware being used where we were not affected. That was not because we were lucky. That was because we were throwing obstacles in the path and building firewalls as fast as we could. Since all you can do is stay ahead of these, you can't build one and say, there, I can go home now. So training and constant attention to the protective measures, I can guarantee you, is ongoing. I am briefed weekly on this, and the brief itself is pages long as I look at the various blocks and countermeasures we're putting in place and what we're finding out about what various actors are up to. Senator, anything else, Chairman?
Senator, I'd probably say two things. I do believe, and I've seen it, that the service chiefs in particular have really changed the command climate with regard to cyberspace and emphasized that, and treated violations of the protocols associated with our information technology as violations of the UCMJ and holding people accountable. And so, as the Secretary said, it's about training. It's also about accountability, and I think our culture of accountability with regard to information technology has changed a great deal. I also think with the support of the Congress, our cyber capabilities, while we continue to need to grow them, have grown quite a bit. The 133 cyber mission teams that you all approved, 70% of them now are fully operationally capable. I think if we had this conversation 24, 36 months ago, we would have been talking about just getting out of the gate. Now 70% of them are fully operationally capable, and in the coming months we'll have 133 of those teams that are fully operationally capable, and continue to identify requirements to make sure that we can stay out in front of the threat. But I think the Secretary used the word complacency, and I think your fundamental question is, do we get it? And are we changing the culture, and are we taking effective action to deal with the threat? And I do think we have significantly changed the culture, and none of us believe we're where we need to be.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would say that one of the things that worried me the most in this article I read was that there was a purported story of a Russian soldier in Syria and how he had been heroic and the way he had died fighting ISIS, and that this spread like wildfire through troops in various places. And we've seen an uptick in the popularity, the approval rating of Putin in Russia in this country. And I just worry that they are really insidiously trying to insert combat-related stories that reflect favorably on Russian soldiers when instances may not even be true, that is infecting our troops with maybe less than a clear eye about what Russia is and what Russia is trying to do, and I just wanted to put that on the record.
This is also understood throughout NATO, Senator. The German Minister of Defense, she was explaining to me how one of their soldiers deployed to Lithuania, I think it was alleged to have raped a Lithuanian girl. Here comes the German bad soldiers in, completely made up story, trying to undercut the cohesion of NATO. I'm just pointing out that this is a military problem. It's accepted as a military problem, and we're working it. But I think we've got a long ways to go up against this rather imaginative enemy that we've got.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Sullivan has some additional questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, I just wanted to follow up on the North Korea discussion briefly. Mr. Secretary, General Dunford, I know you're a Korean War history buffs in many ways. I've heard you talk about the Korean War. As a matter of fact, yesterday in your House Armed Services testimony, General Dunford, you talked about a potential conflict on the Korean Peninsula. Seoul residents would face casualties unlike anything we've seen in 60 or 70 years. And General Milley had similar testimony a couple weeks ago before this committee about what a conflict on the Korean Peninsula could be like. Mr. Secretary, you just mentioned the rapidly developed threat that the North Koreans present in terms of an intercontinental ballistic nuclear missile. And to Senator Graham's question, you stated it was the policy of the Trump administration to prevent them from getting that capability. And I think you have strong support from most members of the committee on that. But it certainly does seem like those two issues are going to start colliding here relatively soon. Yeah. And I know there's a lot of ways to prevent them from getting that kind of capability, left of launch kind of activities. But if one of those ways was a decision to take some kind of preemptive military action, I believe that would clearly trigger Congress's Article I authority with regard to declaring war, and you would need this body's authority to take such action. Do you agree with that, or has that been a discussion in the Trump administration? It's a very big issue that I'm not sure has gotten enough attention.
I've not brought that issue to the President's attention, sir. Right now, as you know, from Mar-a-Lago, where the President met with his counterpart, to Secretary Tillerson and I, who will be following up with our counterparts in next week or in 2 weeks here in Washington, as we have strategic security dialogues. We're doing everything we can to avoid resorting to war in terms of protecting ourselves and our allies.
Well, I think it's an issue that should be on somebody's radar screen, because not that we want that, but part of what the President's been trying to do, and I'm fully supportive, is get the Congress to be supportive of his policy. Like I mentioned, that's why I thought the briefing at the White House a few months ago was actually very useful. But to continue to have that support, we need to be involved, and I think that's something that this committee needs to be cognizant of, but also the White House does as well. Let me ask one final question. In the past 6 weeks, the Russians have sent Bear bomber missions off the coast of Alaska that have been intercepted by our F-22s based there 5 times in the last 6 weeks. What do you think the Russians are up to with this kind of very persistent checking of our NORAD systems? And that's a pretty active engagement. Last time it was not just with Bear bombers, but with fighter escorts. What do you think they're trying to do in the Arctic, and what are they trying to achieve, and why are they so active up there?
Sir, I'm not sure what they're trying to achieve there. When you look at the combination of their cyber threats to democracies, when you look at what they're doing in Syria, the Bear bombers, as you put this panoply of activities together, it's very, very concerning, and we're going to have to turn this around. This cycle has got to be turned around. I think it is going in the wrong direction in terms of stability and peace, and this is where miscalculations can occur.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the witnesses for their patience, and I thank them for their responses. And I want to emphasize again, Mr. Secretary, it's not your fault, not yours, Secretary Norquist, General Dunford, but we're not going to sit still while you settle these internecine strife that is obviously going on, which is preventing this strategy from coming forward. We're moving forward with authorization, with appropriation, and without a strategy, it makes our job 10 times harder. I think we've been pretty patient with you. We're going to start putting pressure on because we need a strategy. And to sit here in June 13th, 2017, and say, well, don't worry, we're going to be coming forward with a strategy, things are happening too rapidly in the world. So, look, you have my greatest respect, admiration, but we are not doing the job for the American people that they expect us to do. So, it is what it is. I thank the witnesses, and I thank you for being here. Hearing is adjourned.